What's up, guys? We are live. So welcome to the Kevin Ray Wilder receipts debate. So we're going to be debating Kevin's receipts. Plot twist. I'm just kidding. This is the pro-choice versus pro-life debate. You guys
It's the ultimate receipt. How many girls did you have to convince to get an abortion? That's how much. It's directly tied to how much game you have.
Yeah, I've actually never had to do that, believe it or not. But I think that's probably because
It's good to know.
I can't even, when you're on TRT, they say that your sperm count really goes down. So I think that's probably a big part of it.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess this was the first time you and I have ever done debate. We've done dozens and dozens of podcasts together, but we've never debated. I think
we're usually on the same side. We're both destroying black pillars together, or Rolo and Fresh and Fit fanboys together.
Yeah. Because this is the first topic we found where we have a disagreement on. So yeah, we'll just go for however long. Keep it pretty informal. But I guess, do you want to start off by just outlining both of our positions on this?
Yeah, I guess so. Do you want to wait for some more people to roll in, or do you just want
to? We can wait. We can wait a little bit. Yeah. We can just bullshit.
That's usually what I like to do, because I notice once you hit live, usually about 5 minutes in, that's when most people arrive.
Yeah, people.
So I don't want people to show up and then they're just like, what's going on?
Yeah. People need to see the delts in order to get them to come in. Maybe you can do
exactly.
a flex to kind of entice the low-key homos.
Yeah. The more that's why I'm wearing this,
Yeah. Well, there's always
people come to debates about abortion to see, they come for that and then they stay for the gains. That's the whole point.
Right. Someone said, this is a pretty funny comment. They said, I heard whoever wins the debate gets to make love to Rhaegar.
Well, I mean, Alex already makes love to Rhaegar on a regular basis, and Rhaegar has already, sent me some NSFW pictures before. So,
oh yeah,
sorry to tell you, Alex. I mean, I'm low key Rhaegar's online side piece.
Getting cucked by my own dog. God damn it. Mm-hmm. There's some photos of
the best of us, bro.
Assholes. So yeah, it's it exists. Did you watch my debate last night?
No. I streamed last night, though, and barely anyone watched it, and I think it's because everyone was watching yours. So first of all, fuck you. No, I'm joking.
we got to organize better so we don't stream at the same time.
No, dude, it's okay. It's going to be impossible because this July, I'm trying to stream every day as a 30-day challenge, so it's literally impossible. It's, it is what it is. It's fun. Anybody who really wanted to watch whatever I was talking about, they'll watch the replay or they'll watch stream highlights. So it's not a big deal.
What were you talking about?
Well, I was just trying to, I didn't know what topic to cover. So I was just I'll just react to cringy TikToks. And that's basically all I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I got into a debate with this chick who, it was interesting. She told me she was raped 17 times.
What? By the same guy?
No, I don't think so. And I didn't want to be insensitive or anything, but I was like, damn, that is a lot. What is going on there?
Where are your receipts? If I'm joking, that's terrible. A terrible joke. Receipts did happen.
I'm not saying that she's making it up. No, I mean, I don't have any reason to suspect she's lying. I'm just wondering what's how does that happen so many times? I don't know. But anyway, I don't want to go too deep into that. But so it was an interesting debate, but she got quite emotional at times. So I was trying to be nice, but she kind of politely rage quit. She was she was okay, well, I gotta go because it's getting kind of late. I was like, all right.
Well, damn. You and your debating SJWs. I need to start debating them too, man. It seems fun. I don't have a TikTok account that perpetually triggers SJWs, though, so maybe I'll have to create one of those. I imagine that's where you got all of them from, right?
Yeah, pretty much all of them. Yeah, exactly. I got some good debates coming up. I'm debating on Destiny again on Monday. I got
nice. About what?
Some stuff he said about pickup that I disagree with.
Okay.
And also this guy, Steve the Dean Williams. Do you know who that is?
Yeah, I know who that is. Yeah.
Well, I don't know much about him, but people told me I should debate him, so I reached out and he agreed. I don't know.
I mean, he's a game guy. I know he's friends with Duke and Don.
Okay.
I know people say he doesn't have any like receipts or whatever, but you know, I don't know, whatever. But yeah, you want to get started? I think it's 5 minutes in, so we should just.
Yeah. Let me just say this one last thing. On Saturday, I have the most interesting debate of all. I'm debating a dominatrix, a female dominatrix, and her fucking sex slave. And the sex slave reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, my mistress saw your debate, and she really wants to debate you, and I can come on too." And like, I'm like, "Okay, sure." So I'm gonna be debating this fucking chick who's like fairly attractive, who's a dominatrix, and her slave. And I'm like really curious what they disagree with me on. But I'm like excited for that one. I'm like, what kind of arguments are they going to make? Like, I'm just curious to get inside the mind of like a male sex slave, be like, so why do you enjoy being a little bitch? Like, can you give me like 3 reasons? Like, what are the advantages of being?
See, there could definitely be some very viral moments there.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm just imagining like Mr. Slave from South Park.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can get started. So, do you want to start off just by like outlining, I guess, your position? I'll outline my position.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, when it comes to abortion, I think abortion is wrong, and the reason that I think it's wrong is because I believe it is an extermination of a life, more specifically, a human life. So yeah, that's kind of the basic premise behind it. A little bit of background on myself. I was raised religious. I don't consider myself technically religious, as in like I follow any sort of, Christianity or whatever. I purely came to the pro-life position from a scientific standpoint, because for me, I'm not one of those guys that's like goes around and tries to bang as many chicks as possible, but I am. If I had to describe myself, I'd say I'm more libertine than most, right? So like I'm not interested in having long-term relationships anytime soon. I do engage in casual sex, so it would make sense logically for me to be pro-choice if the evidence was there. If there was enough evidence to show that abortion was okay, I would totally be pro-choice. But I'd be intellectually dishonest in thinking that, because there's no evidence to show that that is okay. Hence my pro-life position. So.
Before I outline my position, let me just try to figure out your position a little better. So, what kind of evidence would it take for you to change your opinion?
What kind of evidence? I mean, that's tough to say, man, because it's kind of like if somebody was just like, well, what evidence would you need to say that like murder is okay? Well, I don't know. It's a tough question to answer. I could say maybe potentially the circumstances. Certain circumstances might allow for abortions to happen sometimes, and for it to not necessarily be ethically okay, but not something that's like morally bad or reprehensible in any way. So it'd be circumstantial from that standpoint. But essentially what it does come down to is whether that's a human life or not. And if we do determine that it is a human life, then no matter what stage it's at, it is wrong to terminate it.
Okay, so the only way you could change your position is if someone was to show you evidence that the fetus is not a human life, correct? Is that correct? Statement?
Yeah. If it's just literally like, a ball of not just a ball of cells, but it's literally just not a human life. So for example, right, I could give a fuck if somebody aborted a deer fetus, right? Like if there's some pregnant deer. I'll give you a perfect example. So, my dad went out hunting like over a year ago or something, and he sent me a video, and he shot this boar. And then when they shot the boar, they opened the boar up and they saw that the boar was pregnant with a bunch of little boars, right? And so do I think that those little boars have that their lives are valuable the same way a human's is? Absolutely not, right? So it's more specifically if it's human. That's what matters.
You believe in the order of hierarchy or intrinsic value when it comes to life. So meaning a ant is less valuable than a cow, and a cow is less valuable than a human, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The second question I have, because I think this is like a little bit of a straw. I'm not saying you're doing this, but this is like a little bit of a straw man argument that people on the right make, which is like, oh, people on the left or people who are pro-choice, they love abortion or something like that. But I think 99.9% of people, no matter where they are, they agree that abortion's not a good thing. No one's like, yeah, abortion, fuck yeah, I can't wait to get an abortion, right? It's not like, getting a gun where you're excited about it, right? Some people who love guns, they get excited about it. It's like, it's an unfortunate decision you have to make. So you say that it's wrong, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. It's not ideal, but do you think it should be illegal? That's the real question.
Oh yeah, I think it should be illegal.
Okay. So do you think that it should be left up to the states, or you think it should be just illegal outright?
I think it should be illegal outright because
Okay.
it fundamentally goes against the values that are in the Bill of Rights, just whatever it means to be American. It's just put aside the laws and everything, right? I think everybody, whether you believe in God or not, everybody has God-given rights that transcends, whatever rights are within the government that you live in, with the territory that you live in that has a governing body. You can call it God-given rights, you can call it universal rights, whatever. Just the fact that you are a Homo sapien, you are team human, you automatically have certain rights that transcend whatever the laws are within wherever you're living. And the right to not be, the principle of non-aggression, I think applies. That's something that's fundamental to my philosophy as a whole, is the non-aggression principle. Do not aggress upon others who aren't aggressing upon you. So the most egregious example of that is something like murder. Now, I will say this, because a lot of times, I think it's good to get potential strawmans and stuff out of the way. I know you and I are both good faith debaters and we're friends, so we never do that to each other, but I think it's important to establish both sides. When pro-lifers say that somebody is, when they say abortion is murder, a lot of times people, women especially, who have either had an abortion or they know somebody who's had an abortion, automatically thinks, oh my God, this person is calling me a murderer. That's not the case at all, because there's actually a legal term for it. It's called mens rea, where you need to have, actually have awareness that what you are committing is a crime, right? So a woman who has an abortion, who, one, doesn't think that her fetus is human, two, doesn't think that what she's aborting, that's murder, they can't be culpable for that, right? Now, once you have all the evidence and stuff laid out to you of what an abortion actually is, what it looks like, all the details behind it, you've thought about it philosophically and everything, and you've come to the conclusion that it is murder, or that it is an extinguishing of a human life, and then you proceed to go through with it, that's when you should be culpable. So the basic pro-life position is to never prosecute the mother, but to prosecute abortion doctors themselves, because they know exactly what's going on.
Prosecute the fetus. That fucking fetus. He knew what they were doing.
Exactly.
You knew what you were doing.
Yes.
You asked for it. Okay, so now that I understand your position, let me kind of outline my position, and we could get into like the meat and bones of this. So my goal isn't to say, abortion is awesome, we should all get down with abortion. No, like, abortion is a serious decision. I don't think it's a good thing either way. However, my whole thing is that just because something is wrong doesn't mean that it should be illegal, right? I think lying is wrong, but I don't think that it should be illegal to tell lies. And it's the same token abortion. I think that abortion, is wrong in some ways. I just don't think that it should be illegal. And for three reasons. One is the macro reason, because it's a drain on the system. Because if you get rid of abortion, you have basically a higher healthcare cost, because women are going to do like back alley abortions and shit like that, and they're going to need medical care afterwards. Two, a whole bunch of unwanted children are going to grow up. They're going to be a drain in the foster care system. There's going to be more crime. Number two, it hurts men. So, if you're an up and coming, guy, you're like, whatever, you're like in business or whatever, you have a career, and let's just say you do your due diligence and you put a condom on, but the condom break, which does happen. That happened to a friend of mine. You now have a child, and that could completely derail your whole life, your whole business, everything you had going for you. And number three, I think it hurts women because, again, they have to do things like back alley abortions. especially hurts women who have less money, because the rich woman, they'll always find a way. Even if you make it 100% illegal, they'll still get an abortion. They still have private doctors. They'll still find a way to do it. But the women who don't have money, they're the ones who can get more fun. So those are, and I will outline more specific like proof and evidence of each one of those things. So thus, my argument is that I don't think abortion should be illegal because the cons outweigh the pros if you make it illegal. But I think there's two different ways of looking at this, and I want to see if we can get one out of the way real quick before we move on to the other one, because I think maybe on the first one we can agree on it fairly quickly. There's two different ways of looking at this, from a practical and from a philosophical perspective, right? And they are somewhat different. So the practical perspective is like, is the cons, like if we make abortion illegal, are the cons worse than the pros, right? And I don't know, like I'm wondering if you would agree that from a practical perspective, it doesn't really like make sense to make abortion illegal, or do you disagree with
that? Say that last part again.
Okay, so like I said, there's
no, just the way you phrased that question was
it's a little tricky
to me.
Would you agree or disagree that just from a practical perspective, like not from a ideological, philosophical perspective, practical perspective, in terms of the net good versus net bad, more net bad will come from making abortion illegal?
So I have I think we talked about this a little bit before on a stream where we kind of talked about this a bit. So, if you're taking it from a consequentialist perspective, as in like, okay, well, we judge the goodness or wrongness of an action based on the consequences. Well, then the answer to that question is going to be relative to the person's values. So for example, right, this would actually be, if you're taking a consequentialist approach, it would actually be counterintuitive to people on the right. And what's the reason for that? The vast majority of abortions happen in low-income areas that heavily vote Democrat. So let's say that all abortions are completely illegal and nobody is able to have an abortion at all, right? Back alley or whatever, right? Let's just have a scenario where abortions just don't exist like that. It's just not possible to do it. Well, overwhelmingly, those low income areas are going to have more kids. They're going to have more voters. And then overwhelmingly, the Democrats are actually over time probably going to overtake the right, right? So it's actually, if we take a consequentialist perspective, you could actually make the argument that the Republicans actually get hurt in terms of voting if abortion is illegalized. See here, but the issue is consequentialist arguments, and this is why I have a lot of respect for the pro-life movement, is because a lot of people who are heavily in the pro-life movement understand this, and despite that, they still think that this is such a fundamental human wrong that they still stand up for it, because they take a deontological perspective, which is basically saying, okay, well, something is right or wrong in and of itself, right? We don't look at the second order consequences, the third order consequences, the fourth. We look at the first order consequences. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the scenarios that you brought up. So what was your first thing you said? Basically, okay,
before we get into that, because I think you misunderstood my so how about something like this? Like if there was some data to suggest that when you make abortions illegal, the number of abortions doesn't go down at all. So let's say there's an average of 10,000 abortions per year in America, and we know that if we make them illegal, it still stays at 10,000, right? So we don't do anything to decrease the number of, let's call them, dead fetuses or dead babies. But we know that, I don't know, let's just say 50% more women die or something like that from doing back alley abortions. That would be like from a practical perspective, where it's like, that's what I'd be asking. So if there was something like that showed that making abortions illegal doesn't decrease the number of abortions, but increases the number of damage to women's health or whatever, that would be like my question. Would that be like enough for you to say, okay, from a philosophical, ideological perspective, I still think it's wrong, but from a practical perspective, I can see that making them illegal doesn't really do anything to help.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, that's just not something that would work out in practicality. And even if it did, if you have a deontological perspective on it saying, hey, this is wrong in and of itself, then it should be wrong no matter what. So if we take a sort of a logical equivalent of that, and we just say murder overall. So if we find out that, hey, making murder illegal doesn't change the amount of murders at all, should we then make murder legal? right? So you'd have to make a similar argument for that. And, with that, I don't think it's not realistic because, obviously, if you make murder illegal, less people are going. Somebody who wants to murder somebody, they're going to murder somebody no matter what. But it's going to stop some people from murdering people, right? And then on top of that, imagine that you have as a foundational thing to say murder is okay in your society, right? One of the consequences of that is people are just going to be like, oh, like they're always going to be looking at over their backs and everything. So
Yeah. Well, let's take
again, it's one of those situations where it's just like I understand where you're going with it, but it's so unrealistic. Automatically, when you make something illegal, you do decrease the prevalence of it. Now, it depends on the prevalence and the usage of it. Now, you could make the argument that that's not the case for some things, like the war on drugs, for example, right? You could make the argument that the war on drugs actually increased drug usage. It's possible. But something like murder, as far as I know, there haven't really been any societies that just made murder legal and okay outright, no matter what, in all circumstances.
Yeah,
but I think if we did a thought experiment, we would understand that probably if murder is legal and can't be prosecuted, there would be more murders than non-murders. So if we say that that's the case, then it's probably the same thing with abortion. If you make abortion completely legal, although there are going to be some people who similar to how somebody who's hell-bent on murdering somebody, they're going to murder somebody no matter what, regardless of whether it's illegal or not. They're going to try to get away with it, but they're going to do it. It's the same thing with back alley abortions, right? If some woman is hell-bent on getting an abortion, even if it's illegal, she's going to go do it anyway, right? But there's going to be a bunch of women who still don't end up doing it. And that's the whole point of making something illegal.
Okay, so yeah, let's only kind of dive into that. So I think murder, because there's never been a society where murder is legal. But something like abortion, there's actually been countries that made it illegal, then legal. So there's a good amount of data on that. I think a better analogy would be something like guns, something I actually agree with the right-wing people on. And I've changed my position on guns purely from a practical perspective. And I'll explain why. So if with guns, obviously me and pretty much everyone else is like, school, mass shootings are bad, blah, 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 blah. But then I saw data that suggests that banning guns does absolutely nothing to decrease the rate of murder. It actually potentially increases it. So when I saw that kind of data, I'm like, okay, from a practical perspective, it makes no sense for us to ban guns because it doesn't decrease violent crime. It actually potentially increases it or keeps it neutral. Right. So that was one example of something where just from a practical perspective, I changed my mind on. And with abortion, we do have that kind of data because it's been legal and illegal in some countries. Countries have gone back and forth on this. So we actually do have data to see what happens when it's legal, what happens when it's legal. So I guess, again, back to the question is, would there be like any kind of data that I could show you not from an ideological perspective? I understand ideologically and philosophically think it's wrong, but from a practical perspective, where you're like, okay, well, when we make abortions illegal, abortions don't go down. It's just, health costs and like negative health effects go up.
So basically you have data to show that when abortion is illegal, there's still just as many abortions.
Yeah. So there's different studies on this, but like, let me pull this up, for example. 1 second.
Because again, practically, yeah, let's just look at it.
So, if you think about it logically, and also I think there's orders of magnitude. Like, for example, is abortion slightly go down? Does it significantly go down? Does it not change at all? Right. So here's one from PubMed. Illegal abortion is responsible for up to half maternal death and consumes a large portion of health resources in many developing countries, particularly in Africa and Latin America. Illegal situation of abortion in a country does not influence the abortion rate, but illegally is associated with much greater risk of complications and death. To make abortion legal is not enough access to. So here it just kind of goes on a tangent, but basically the point is saying is that the legality situation of abortion does not actually influence its abortion rate, but it does influence its health consequences and whatnot. And I think they have a whole bunch of stuff that's like cited.
Okay, but here's the thing. Look, so we're saying country dependent, right? So all we have to do, because abortion was illegal until I think 1973. So all you have to do is see, is there more abortions that are happening now than before 1973? And the numbers definitely do not add up from that standpoint. Not even close.
I would argue though that's abortion has also, like, no one even knew what abortion was for a very long period of time. It's like something that is more of I know, like a wonder of modern medicine. So I would need to see a drastic increase in like between 1970 and 1971. There's like, oh, this is clear versus instead of like a slow and progressive. So we can pull it up. Do you have that by chance?
No.
Okay, well let's.
I mean, that's just like, look, it's literally like saying, hey, if we make murder illegal, would or I'm sorry, murder legal, would the amount of murders go up? Yeah, for sure. And again, like here's another thing too, because to your point, right? Abortion is a complicated medical process, and abortions, illegal abortions did exist, before the sexual revolution, before Roe versus Wade. They absolutely did exist, but yeah, they were dangerous, sure. Um, but the thing is to in order to actually do an abortion, you do need some sort of medical expert, right? So just by the mere fact that there are going to be less abortion providers, automatically the number of abortions will go down. And here's another thing too. I know that you keep saying, okay, we'll put ideology, put whatever aside, but that's the central point here, man. That's everything. So let me put it this way, right? If we found, for example, because this is one of the dangers of reducing, I'm not saying you're deliberately doing this, but reducing human beings down to statistics and whatnot, because you can make the same exact argument to be like, hey, statistically speaking, Black people commit more crimes than anyone in the United States. All right. So if we just take all of them and ship them over to Africa or deport them, then technically the amount of murders will probably go down. So that's a consequentialist argument, and that's the reason why consequentialist arguments like that don't hold up, because it's very much the Machiavellian ends justify the means type standpoint. And when you do that, then that leads to a slippery slope of a whole bunch of different problems, because first of all, who is the one person who's determining what those values are, right? That's the biggest one. But it's the reason that there's certain principles in which you want to have a hardline deontological perspective on, and free speech and gun rights is one of them, for example, right? What's the reason that we don't make, even if there is a statistic that comes out and says, hey, if we suppress certain forms of free speech, actually, it's going to make a world a better place. Look at this study that I found. Would you be okay with suppressing free speech?
Well, we do. So no one's a free speech absolutist, so pretty much no one is. But that's a side point. But we do already suppress free speech. Like you can't go to a movie theater and yell fire, bomb, something like that. So we do.
Yeah, but that's not free. That's not free speech, because with that you're deliberately spreading lies in order to harm.
Well, I can't, for example, right? We can't, like, doxing is pretty much banned across all platforms. Like we do have reasonable restrictions on free speech. But I think the shipping Black people to Africa is not the best analogy. I think like we need to take something like, I think we can use either guns or war on drugs, right? So for example, let's say you are really anti-drug, like you think drugs are wrong. Right? Like you think like you should never do drugs, right? That's kind of my dad's position. Drugs are wrong. Although I've gotten to be like a kind of a 180 on that as we got older. But anyway, so I think drugs are wrong. But then you see data that suggests that the war on drugs doesn't actually reduce drug use, but just increases crime and stuff like that. You can still be ideologically, I think drugs are wrong. I think drug use is fucked up. But the war on drugs doesn't make sense, because it's not actually decreasing drug use, right? The same thing could be with guns. Like you could be really anti-gun. You think there's no reason why a person should ever have a gun, right? But then you see data that suggests when you make guns illegal, violence doesn't go down. It actually goes up, or whatever, stays neutral. Then you're like, okay, I still think guns are wrong, right? I'm not for guns, like, right? But and this is kind of where I'm at. I'm not for guns, but the data is that, restricting guns doesn't do anything to prevent violence. So I think this could be like this kind of thing where you're like, I think abortion is still really wrong. I think it should be illegal, but I can acknowledge at least that making abortion illegal doesn't do anything to fix the problem.
So I want to ask you why. So for example, with the drug issue that you brought up, if you find out that making drugs illegal doesn't do anything, in fact, it makes things worse, why is it better to just keep it legal? Like what's the ultimate goal that you're striving for? To make it so you say, oh, well, you make a value judgment of making it legal is better than making it illegal. Why is that?
Are we talking about the drugs or what specifically? Are you like asking me why I would be in favor of legalizing drugs?
Yeah.
I mean, there'll be a number of reasons. One is I'm a libertarian. I think people should be able to do whatever the fuck they want. Two, I think that the war on drugs basically just puts money in the hands of organized crime instead of the government. It's not taxable. It's not regulated. Three, I don't think it actually does anything to dissuade people from doing drugs. So yeah, I think there's a number of reasons
And
why.
it leads more to like, you know, murders and cartels and everything and that type of stuff. Right?
There's there's really no pros to the wars on drugs. There's
basically. Okay. So the reason that you would be more for it being legal is because it's more conducive to human flourishing than if it was illegal. It's better for humanity for it to be legal than for it to be illegal.
Well, so on the war on drugs, I think the war on drugs is a bad idea from a philosophical and a practical perspective. One, I think that it's your choice whether you want to do drugs or not. So that's a philosophical argument. So even if the data was like the war on drugs is actually working, like it's actually reducing people using drugs, I would still be against the war on drugs purely from a philosophical perspective, right? So I do want to,
because from a philosophical perspective for you, it's like, okay, well, you're infringing on people's rights by saying that this thing should be illegal. Therefore, it is counter to human flourishing and the betterment of humanity.
Right, but also from a practical perspective. So the war on drugs, for me, I disagree with it from a philosophical and a practical perspective. And I'm not trying to get you change your mind right now on.
No. I'm against the war on drugs too.
I'm just wondering if we can get to a place where we agree that it's a bad idea from a practical perspective, but still disagree that it's a bad idea from a philosophical perspective. So that's kind of
I'm in total agreement with you with the war on drugs, and and the reason that I am is because from a practical standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, in terms of human flourishing and the betterment of humanity, the war on drugs is antithetical to that, and that's the reason why with what you're bringing up, right? With all these consequentialist arguments. I'm not always saying consequentialist arguments should be completely disavowed in some way, right? So, for example, from a practical standpoint, the war on drugs and the reason why drugs should remain legal is because the data shows that from a consequentialist perspective, you look at the consequences of the war on drugs versus, not having the war on drugs, and less people die, right? Because you don't have cartels, all these other types of things. So that's the key point, is people, right? It's helping with human flourishing. So we could talk about all these different things all day of like, okay, well, what about this, and that scenario, like where, mothers might end up having more back alley abortions, whatever. Again, what matters at the end of the day is whether that is a human life or not, right? So do you agree that if we agree that the fetus, that those human lives or those fetuses that are being aborted, if they are human lives, then it doesn't matter what the statistics show, that is wrong in and of itself? Because really that's the central question it always comes down to is that a life or not, right? Because all those different things that you brought up, it would be irrelevant if they were actual human lives that had value.
No, I don't think it would be irrelevant. I think we could be at a place where we say, "Hey, I think abortion is wrong." Well, also we have to be more specific. I'm not saying abortion is not wrong. I'm just saying it shouldn't be illegal, right? And those two are different things. So if we agree that the fetus is a life, would that automatically mean abortion should be illegal, irregardless of the consequential arguments? No, I think that would be definitely more evidence. But I think then at that point, you have to evaluate based on your own values and come to your own decision. It just comes down how much do you value the practical versus the ideological, right? And for everyone, the answer is different. Some people are completely ideologically driven, and some people are very, very pragmatic. I tend to be more on the pragmatic side, but not entirely. So, no, I don't think that would be like some kind of massive game changer. But I do think it would certainly be useful part of the argument.
Can I ask you a question?
Okay.
So are you for abortion at all stages, as in like just from conceiving all the way up to like right until they're about to be born, or do you draw a line somewhere?
I'm for abortion even after the baby's born. I'm like, take it. No, I'm not.
Were you Hillary Clinton?
I think there should be some kind of reasonable restriction to abortion, and the way Roe versus Wade had it, I think is pretty fair. So that means like Roe versus Wade wasn't like a universal, like you can get an abortion anytime. It only protected abortion up until like I think 12 weeks or 14 weeks, one of those. Like, don't quote me on that, but it was something like that. So it wasn't like with Roe versus Wade, a woman could get an abortion in 8 months. It wasn't like that. It just protected it up to a certain point. And that's kind of what I would like to bring it back to, is where we protect abortion rights until a certain point, a certain reasonable point. I think, now the next question is, where would you draw that point? I would say that sentience is a good starting point. I think is a pretty reasonable. Like, once the baby becomes sentient, is able to feel and perceive things, at that point, we can draw the line. Or before that, I'm okay with drawing the line before that, keeping it 3 months. But I do think we need to protect that choice up until a certain point.
Okay, so you do have like a line drawn somewhere then.
I think you need to have a line, because when you get to like, and the question that always comes up is like, okay, well, if you draw the line 12 months, what's different about, 12 weeks, what's different between 12 weeks and 13 weeks? Well, in all honesty, not much, right? But we do need to have a line somewhere. We do need to have a line in the sand. Like, why is it that, like, for example, if you get caught with like 11 grams of like coke, you get charged with a misdemeanor, but it's 12 grams of coke, it's a felony, right? Is there a big difference between 11 and 12 grams? Not really, right? But we do need to have an arbitrary line somewhere, and this is one of those things. But yes, I do think if we get to a point where like a mother can get an abortion like 2 days before the baby's born, at that point that baby could have like lived by itself. It could have, it would have been self-sufficient. So at that point, okay, that's like.
Well, hold on. So that's one of the issues that I have with that argument, is to say that the life will be self-sufficient, because it won't. It still needs like the protection of the mother and everything. It still needs to be raised, right? And then also, you have like premature babies that are born prematurely as well, right? And so really the issue is like drawing these arbitrary lines. Like, okay, well, who is drawing these lines? Who is making these value judgments, and what is it based off of? I want to ask you this, because there's two different things going on here. I think there could be
your question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do think that, I just want to clarify this. We're drawing an arbitrary line either way, because I'm assuming you're cool with the morning after pill, right?
I'm like neutral about it, but I think because technically what it does is there's what is it? There's conception, and then somehow after it conceives, it like fails to implant or something. But then half the time with the morning after pill, like, you don't actually even know if conception actually even happened, right? So that one I'm kind of iffy about. Okay, I don't have a clear stance on it the way that I do about abortion.
Okay. But when we draw the law, if we ever make the law, we might have to, either it's going to be either before the morning after pill, after the morning after pill, at the point of where the sperm touches the egg. So we're drawing the line somewhere either way. This is not like some kind of hard science that's set in stone. We're just drawing the line at some point, right? And we can have reasons for each point. Like, I can say 4 months really makes sense, because that's when the baby has sentience according to studies. Or we can say at the point of the sperm touches the egg, because that's when blah blah blah. Or we can say at the point of like whatever, like anything more than condom is whatever. So we do have to draw the line somewhere. We can have arguments for that, but still like arbitrary either way. But okay, go ahead with your question.
Yeah. So I was gonna say because I've argued both sides of this debate, because I want to try to, again, for me, I have a lot of stake in it, because I need to like look. If anything, I personally benefit if I was pro-choice, right? Because then I could just blam inside of girls raw. I don't give a fuck, right?
Well, just for the record, most people don't do that. Like, I don't just blam inside of girls and hope for the best. Well, okay.
Well, I understand that, but technically speaking, if I really just didn't think that was a life being created, and I had, put the financial consequences or whatever aside, it might be risk worth taking. It depends on how good it feels. Anyway, so I've played both of these sides in my head. I've debated them with a bunch of people, and I still came to this conclusion, because really what it comes down to is, one, is that a life, right? Is that a human life? And then after that, and I don't think there's any denying that it is a life, and we can get to that in a second here, right? But the only way that the pro-choice argument actually holds up in any way, shape, or form, I still think is logically unsound, is if you acknowledge that it's a life, but you make a value judgment and say certain lives are more valuable than others. So for example, if you say that, okay, well, why is it tragic if a 20-year-old, suddenly dies out of nowhere, and it's less tragic when a 90-year-old dies out of nowhere, right? So you're making a value judge, like automatically we're going to be like, oh, well, a 20-year-old dying is way more tragic because they had so much more life to live and everything, and they're so young.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so we automatically make value judgments saying, okay, one life is more valuable than the other, but they're still both lives, right? Does that necessarily mean that, like, just because we think inherently think a 20-year-old is more valuable than a 90-year-old, does that then give me permission to stab the 90-year-old? Like, no, it doesn't, because it's still
right.
a life regardless, right? So the only way that you can justify any kind of pro-choice argument, again, because I've debated both sides, with myself to try to come to this conclusion, is to say that yes, it is a. You just imagine me like, abortion's wrong. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Actually, if you look in the deontological perspective versus okay. But anyway, skid over. Yeah. So that's really what it comes down to. And I think it's central to talk about. First, I want to know your opinion if you do believe that it is a life. And if it is a life, at what point does it become a life? Or if it isn't a life, at what point does it become a life?
Okay, sure. So we're kind of moving into the ideological. We can move there, and then we can circle back to the practical side as well. I'm okay with doing that. So
well, I want to say it's ideological. It's more sort of like it's morality and ethics based. And that's kind of the central question to this, right? Is it like, is abortion wrong? That's by definition a moral question, right?
yes, but I think also the real question is, should abortion be illegal? Right. So I think I agree. Like you do. Like if well, first of all, it's how do you define wrong? Like there's different degrees of wrong. Like I would say me showing up 10 minutes late to the stream is not nearly as wrong as me like fucking selling your secrets out, which is not nearly as wrong as me murdering you. So there's degrees of wrong, right?
But you do think that abortion's wrong then?
Yeah, I think on some level it is. Yeah, it's not a good thing by any stretch. Like I think
well, why not? I mean, if it's not a life, it's basically like, okay, so Louis C.K., he had a really good stand-up bit once where he's pro-choice himself, but he was trying to be like, you guys think that these pro-life guys are like all crazy. They literally think you're killing a human being. I personally think you're just like taking a shit. So it's either you're killing something or you're taking a shit. And I thought it was very profound the way that he put it, because that is really what it comes down to. It's like, well, if it's not a human life, then why is it bad to abort it?
Right. So yeah, I will fully acknowledge that the pro-choice people, they really strawman the pro-life arguments, and they make it seem like it's about like power and control and hurting women, when it's really, I fully acknowledge that. Like the 99% of pro-life people, they're arguing from a place of like, I think it's a life, not from like, I want to fuck over a woman. So I think that's a really big strawman
That's what
argument
you think
that pro-choicers make, which really derails the whole discussion and makes it less likely to convince other people. So yeah, just to be clear, I don't do that.
But yeah, I want to, the reason that I brought that up is I'm curious, like, well, why do you think it's bad?
Okay.
Because if you don't think it's a human life, then like,
well, so
who cares? It's like taking a shit,
Yeah. So if I got my girlfriend Natty pregnant, and she came to me, she's like, Alex, I will fully let you make up this decision, which for the record, she would never do. She would actually just make that decision herself. But hypothetically speaking, she came to me and said, Daddy, you decide. Like, you can tell me, do you want to be a real daddy or do you want to be just my fictional daddy? Right. Like, she gave me that choice. I would feel it would not be an easy decision for me. It wouldn't just be like, oh yeah, just flush it down. I would really toss and turn with it, because yes, that could be my potential offspring, my potential progeny, right? If she gives birth to it, right? That could be my kid, right? So yeah, it wouldn't be an easy decision for me by any stretch. So there's definitely some level of wrong to doing an abortion. Now, in terms
so isn't that acknowledging that it's a life though?
Okay, so yeah, so I've never denied that it's well, first let me ask this: how do you define life? And I'll tell you if I acknowledge or disacknowledge if it's a life. What's your definition of life?
Of a human life, more specifically?
Yeah, just of life. Yeah.
Well, I would say life is anything that is alive, right? So then, how do you define what is alive? It's something that exists.
Yeah. So by that,
something that is carbon based and has cells, right? And isn't just made up of atoms and that's it, right? So this isn't alive because it's not a carbon based life form. right?
So if we take my heart from my body, put it in a box, it's still beating, blah, blah, it's still alive according to that definition, right?
Your heart?
Yeah, or like my kidney or an organ, right? Because an organ can survive under ice, whatever. Like an organ, like I can take my organs and put it in someone else's body, and that will do the trick. Our organs are, are alive in a way. Like, would that be considered? I'm not being purposely vague. I'm just legitimately trying
No,
to.
no, I know.
Would that, because that would fit under that definition of life, right? It's carbon-based cells that have formed and they have a function, right? There's an element of like.
Well, it's a part of the whole, so it depends on what the whole is, right? So if I'm just saying, okay, well, how do you define a car? Well, a car is the sum of its parts in which the car ends up driving and all this stuff. But then, like, if you take out the engine, is the engine still a car? No, the engine's the engine. It makes up a car itself. So I consider that thing to be the
Let me give a
so for example, right? So if I say like, okay, well, how do you define matter, or how do you define non-carbon based materials? Oh, a car. Well, if that's a car, then I take out the engine from the car. Is the engine a car? It's like, no, it's an engine. You know what I mean?
Okay. So another way of looking at it would be like an ant. An ant would be a life, right? It's alive. It has its own autonomous function. It's just not a human life, but it's alive.
Yep.
Okay. So it really depends on how you define life. But if it's like a combination of cells that have their own, I don't know, like their own independence in terms of like functioning autonomously, then either a fetus is a life or a potential life. It's one or the other. It just depends. It really depends on how you define life. Like, for example, if you say life is something that's sentient, which is, I think, how a lot of people would define life, then a fetus only becomes a life at 4 or 5 months. So at 2 months, it's not sentient, so thus it's not.
Well, how do you define sentience? Because that's a highly contentious. Because vegans will say that type of stuff too, with like their defense of
animals are definitely
eating animals.
Yeah,
so how do you define sentience?
Yeah, animals are definitely sentient. So it's ability to perceive and feel things. We know that animals are sentient. Anyone who says, and by the way, I'm not a vegan, but anyone who says animals are not sentient is being disgenuine. Of course, they're sentient, right?
But how can you? Okay, so let me. If it's your ability to feel and perceive things, let's say, for example, that you're put in a coma. This happens all the time, where people are put in a coma and they're basically actually like a vegetable, right? Does that human life automatically lose value from that point? Because if we're just going based off of sentience, technically at that point you're in a vegetative state. You don't have sentience at that point anymore, right? You can't think or feel. There's a possibility that you might wake up. There's a possibility you might not. But if we're just purely going off of the sentience standpoint, then I would be fully justified in being like, that's not alive. And I just pull the plug just because I feel like, I'm like, haha.
Well, we actually do allow
You're not sentient, so I could,
Well, we actually do allow families to pull the plug on people who are in like, non-recoverable comas. So we do actually have that. But yeah, I'm not saying we should.
And euthanasia is a highly contentious topic.
Right. I'm not saying that sentience should be the definition of life. I'm just saying it is for a lot of people. So I guess I'm trying to, before I can answer the question whether I think a fetus is a life, I still think I need to understand better what the definition of life is, and I can tell you. I would say for me, the definition of a life, for me, a fetus is either a life.
Hold on, either you're freezing up or I'm freezing up.
Give me your definition.
Sorry. Either you're freezing up or I'm freezing up. I didn't hear anything you just said.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, you just, it was like a connection.
For me, a fetus is either a life or a potential life. And which one of those things it is really depends on how you define life. So if we're using sentience, then it's a potential life until it gets to 4 months and then becomes a life. If we're using autonomy, like meaning it can function outside of the host body, then it becomes a life once it's born, right? So it's a potential life still once it's a fetus. So tell me once again, specifically your definition of life, and I can answer your question.
Yeah. So are we there's a very important distinction, right? Life versus human life. I don't care. Again, I said this before with the boar example. Those are technically lives, but it's not a human life because I don't think it has the
we can acknowledge
sort of theological terms. It doesn't have the spark of divinity that humans have that give them value, right? So I would sacrifice 1 million dogs before I would sacrifice one human.
Okay, I'm totally opposite of that. I love dogs way more than humans.
I love dogs too. Don't get me wrong, but
if I have to
I
choose
think, for
between,
example, if somebody killed one human versus they like killed 100 dogs, it would be way more reprehensible if they killed one human, especially if it was an innocent life.
if someone gave me
So,
the
so that's
choice,
what it comes down to: is this a human life or
it's
not? Not
definitely
necessarily
human.
is it just a life, right?
It's human. I think that goes without saying. It's human, right? Obviously, because it's inside a woman, right? A female human woman. So of course it's going to be human. But the question is it a life or is it a potential life? Either way, it's human. And which one of those? Again, it depends on how we define life. So once again, I will like re-ask that question. Is like maybe you could give me like a more specific definition of life, and I'll
If
tell
you
you.
have the human genome, right? If you're a carbon-based life form with a human genome, you are human.
No, I understand what human is, but I'm more curious about what life is.
You're a human life. You're a human life at that point, right? So, for example, like there's no human life until there's a sperm and the egg, right? The sperm itself isn't alive. The egg itself isn't alive. But when there's conception there, and it has at the moment of conception, like a huge percent of who you are, what hair color you are, what hair color you have, your height, even quite possibly your personality, those types of things are determined at that moment of conception, right? So at the moment that happens, where that genetic coding happens, right, where it is like, oh, this is human, you know, all the things that you will become once you are out of the womb, or as you're gestating, and then once you come out of the womb, and will become as you develop. At that point, you are human.
According to that definition, then yes, this would be a life. But that's a pretty, I think, no, like that's a. I mean, like according to that, pretty much anything would be human as soon as the sperm touches the egg. Yeah. So you're saying once you have the once the human genome or the DNA is in place to develop, that's a life according to your definition.
Yeah. So
Okay.
basically, at conception.
Okay, so you're saying, well, we have to be careful with that. At conception is not really a definition; it's more of like when life happens. Um, but okay, so once there's DNA that's formed, that's going to form, then that's going to be a life. Then yeah, according to that definition, that would be a life. I think that, for example, a lot of people would say either once you have autonomy, meaning like you're independent. Some people would say once you have sentience, which was earlier, but
but here, that's exactly the issue there, right? So the fact that you say some people will say this, some people says that. Okay, so if we agree at some point it's going to be a life, then who is the arbiter? Who is the determiner of what is going to be a life at that standpoint? The fact that there are so many different sort of arbitrary lines that people have to cross in order to make this morally acceptable, I think says all that needs to be said. You know, why can't we just take the position, the scientific position, that once something has a human genome, it is human, right? Now, again, this is where I, if I'm playing the other side, this is where, and this is the only way, logically speaking, that you can say that abortion is okay, is if you make a value judgment and say that at certain stages of life, a human being is more valuable than others, right?
Yeah,
but you
so
still have to acknowledge that that is a human life from conception in order for that argument to hold up. Because if you're saying, for example, that that's not a life at all, more specifically, not a human life, but just not a life in general, then let's say, for example, that we see a bunch of cells, a bunch of carbon-based cells over on Mars. What do you think the headline is going to come up as? It's going to say, "Oh, life found on Mars," right? And I mean, unless you don't think that would be considered life found on Mars.
Would that be considered life? Again, depends on how you define life. But I would personally consider that some kind of a life form. Yes. But going back,
I think most people would too. So sorry, one more thing really quickly. So, and I'm not saying that you hold that position, because you kind of acknowledged, or at least you acknowledge my position, that you know, life is at conception, but more specifically, it is a human life based on that once it's conceived.
I think so. Okay, so maybe I'm not explaining my argument well. So I am fully intent on making that argument that I am making a value judgment about how some life is more important than others, and I've never been shy about doing that. Yes, I do think I am going to make that argument, and I'm not trying to be purposely vague, but I'm not really convinced of that yet. It just depends on how we define life. And it is an arbitrary definition either way. I think it is open to interpretation. Like, for example, if we go off of like when there is a human genome or whatever, then according to that argument, like for example, I don't know, like something like you can make the argument that once if you do like infertile fertilization, like you have like sperm and eggs, like you do it like outside in the lab, that already, like the second those two connect outside of the mother, that's already been a life. So that can also take you in a weird direction. So I think it's arbitrary either way.
So I will grant you that one position I'm kind of on the fence about, but the technical pro-life position is that in vitro fertilization is morally wrong, because you have basically what ends up happening is you have a bunch of, you know, eggs and sperm, and then you just try to pick whatever is the best one. Like you hope that one of them conceives, but sometimes a few of them conceive, and then you just have to only end up implanting the best one. So from a pro-life perspective, that's technically wrong as well. And again, for me, I still make a value judgment to say, okay, well, do I think that a abortion at 8 or 9 months is worse? If I had to choose one, is it worse than abortion at, like, you know, the earliest stages? Yes. But similarly, I still think it's wrong to do it the same way that I think it's wrong to kill a 90-year-old over a 20-year-old, even though I've made the value judgment that the 20-year-old's life I would rather preserve than the 90-year-old's life, right? They're still lives at the end of the day. Just because there's degrees of wrongness for each of them, technically both is still murder. So I still say the same thing when it comes to abortion, no matter what the stage is. Now, I understand probably people bring this up all the time of like, okay, what about in the case of rape or incest or whatever? That's where things get tricky, right? Because technically you still are extinguishing a life when you're doing that. And so my technical position on that is if we're talking about laws and stuff, if we're actually making legislation to say, hey, if we illegalize abortion, except for the cases of incest and rape, I'd be like, okay, you know, I still think that that's probably not the greatest, but I'd be willing to make that compromise. You know, sometimes that ends up, you have to do that sometimes, make compromise in politics. So yeah, that's why. So things like in vitro fertilization, for example, right? If somebody said, okay, well, abortions are always going to be illegal except for in vitro fertilization, and in the case of rape and incest, then I'd be like, okay.
Yeah. So right now, I'm not even trying to like even argue about abortion. I'm just trying to, I guess, get to the definition of life. And the whole argument I was making, and I was going to segue to abortion right after that, was that I don't think it's any more crazy to draw the line. Like you draw the line at when the whatever that you say something is a life the minute that the genome or that the egg touches the sperm or whatever, right? And that's reasonable. I also think it's reasonable to say that life is something that starts at the point of sentience, when you can feel and perceive things. And each one of them have their weak points. Like with the sentience, the weak point is the what's it called? Is the person who's in a coma, right?
The vegetated state.
Yeah. With the other one, it's the with the one you mentioned, it's the one with like the fucking in vitro. Or we could do it at the point of when actually the organism, the human, can live outside the mom's body. Like I think that's a little bit too far, but yeah, you can put it anywhere. I don't think one is crazier than the other, and it's just like it depends on how you define life. But I will say this, not to go off like too deep onto a tangent. I will grant the point that yes, a fetus is either a life or a potential life, and I don't think even which one of those matters that much. We can even say it's a life. I am going to make the argument, like you said earlier, that there's degrees of wrong. And that, it's like not nearly as wrong to abort a 2-month fetus as it is, for example, would be to kill like a 2-year-old baby or something like that. And look, I'm not saying that abortion is great. I'm not saying that abortion is, I will acknowledge that abortion is wrong. I just don't think it should be illegal, right? That's the difference there. Because again, the cons outweigh the pros. And this is what I was going back to earlier, the practical versus the philosophical argument. And to like kind of return to that one more time, I guess like, my question would be this. If I could prove to you definitively that making abortion illegal does not at all decrease the number of abortions that takes place, but just increases the number of like negative effects, what at that point, if I could show you that data, would you be like, okay, I still think abortion is wrong from a philosophical perspective, but I understand why from a practical perspective, it makes no sense to make abortion illegal?
No, because like I said before, the whole thing we brought up the drug trade thing before. The reason, so you have to go back to first principles of why you think uh, making what's the greater good that this is achieving, right? So the greater good that you're achieving by the war on drugs is human flourishing, right? So what's the greater good that you are in your mind and maybe in others if you say that, oh well, making abortions illegal will result in, or making abortions illegal will still result in people still getting as many abortions illegally. Again, I highly doubt that's the case, but let's just grant that that's the case. The reason that I don't accept that consequentialist argument is because it is against human flourishing, because I think that human fetuses are humans, right? So that's why I don't accept that no matter what. I'll grant you this. So for example, let's say that you illegalize abortions and somehow all overall abortions go up, right? Well, that is, I still would be in support of illegalizing abortion, because
Really?
it's just like, because you have to take a moral stance against things. It's a similar thing of like, let's say this, right? Let's say here's a perfect example. I'm not going to bring it back to slavery, but we can all agree that slavery is wrong, which is why I always bring it up, right? So if we say, okay, if
Well, I'm
we
just kidding. Yeah, of course.
I mean, it depends on what kind of slave. It's like the dominatrix and the whoever that you're interviewing the other day. I guess
Right. Yeah.
that type of slave is okay. That's more indentured servitude or voluntary servitude.
Right.
But let's say something like slavery, because slavery by definition is involuntary, right? So if something came out that said, hey, illegalizing slavery actually makes slavery more prevalent, should you then say, okay, well, slavery, I can't fucking talk today. Slavery should be legal because illegalizing slavery will cause it to rise. At that point, you still need to make a moral stance and be like, no, instead of us just being like, oh shit, we better make it legalized. We should actually look into the reasons why making it illegal actually makes it go up, because you're still taking that stance that slavery is wrong no matter what, because that completely deletes or negates any possibility of making slavery non-existent in some future. If you automatically just raise the white flag and say, oh my gosh, it's pointless, right? If we try to make slavery illegal and there are more slaves now, I guess we should just give up and just slavery just exists now. Again, the reason that most people will say that that's a ridiculous argument is because we understand morally and ethically that slavery in and of itself is wrong, because you're
Right,
robbing
Kevin,
somebody
I think you
of their
can.
individual liberty. Hold on 1 second, right? So I'm equating that the same exact thing when it comes to human fetuses and abortions, right? Because I consider them to be human, regardless of what consequences happen of that, because I have that moral deontological position that is a life no matter what. I don't care about the consequences of that. And again, I am very, very what is it? So here's one of the reasons that I don't buy the whole thing of, oh, if we make abortions illegal, then abortions will go up. Okay, so with Roe v. Wade, they've already done studies on this, where basically they said, okay, if Roe v. Wade passed, which it did, the prediction is that abortions will go down by 13%. Right. So already automatically we have statistics that show that when you put some sort of restrictions on abortions go down. The issue is, and you might be thinking, oh, well, why is it only 13%? It's because people, it's state to state, right? So somebody can, if abortion is illegal in Texas, they can go up to, I don't know, Florida or something, or I don't know where it's legal, right? So that's why if people are still hell bent on getting abortions, they still will get it. But it does overall decrease the amount of abortions, right? So that's why I'm skeptical of the study you brought up of that wouldn't have an effect.
Kevin, we can have nuanced positions. We can be like, I think slavery is really fucked up, but I acknowledge the fact that the anti-slavery law isn't doing anything. Now, fortunately, that's not the case with slavery, but we can also have a nuanced position like that on abortion, where I think abortion is wrong and should be illegal, but acknowledge that making it illegal doesn't do anything to help the situation. That's just a nuanced position. They're not mutually exclusive.
Okay, so you do, but okay, you're setting a precedent though of allowing things that you think are morally bad to be okay, right? So if you think that is morally bad, do you think most things that you think are morally bad should be illegal?
No, not really. No.
So, for example, you think it's morally bad to suppress free speech or to take somebody's guns? You think it should be illegal, right?
Well, I think a lot of things I think are morally despicable, like being lazy or sloth or lying. But I don't think any of those things should be illegal. So yeah, like a lot of the things that I
But
think
I mean, those things don't necessarily inherently come at the expense of another person's, what we, especially because we're talking about America, right? The What it means to be American is to be able to be free to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right?
but
So
you can,
when you suppress somebody's free speech or take away their right to defend themselves, you're robbing them of that. And so because of that, we say, oh, it's illegal to take somebody's guns away unjustly. It's illegal to suppress speech because we think that it's morally wrong, right? And that's the reason that we have legal systems and stuff set in the first place. Right now, if you're making the argument that like, oh, well, I want to live in this anarchist society where, there's no laws at all. It's a free for all
no,
for
I mean,
everybody.
clearly I don't know. Like,
Yeah, I know you and
yeah,
Austin had that
Austin about that. Yeah.
debate before, right?
I clearly don't
But
want
but that's why I'm kind of confused because if you think that abortion is wrong but should be legal, why not carry that same logic to other things as well, right? Oh, suppressing free speech is wrong, but I think it should be legal. Taking away people's guns is wrong, but I think it should be legal.
because
Right?
you can have nuanced positions. Like you can be a person who thinks, for example, drugs are really wrong. You think that there's no worse crime than someone doing drugs, but then you can also look at the data and acknowledge the fact that war on drugs isn't working and making drugs illegal isn't doing anything. Like that's just having a nuanced position.
Well, also the problem with the drug thing is it's an individual to individual thing, right? So, for example, you'd probably be against somebody against their will, putting somebody drugs into somebody against their will, right? But this is it's to themselves. So, for example, why is it ridiculous to make suicide illegal? Because you're doing it to yourself, right? It's bad.
Right,
It's
but
morally
even
not so good.
even the
But
drug thing, it's not that straightforward. You can make the argument that you doing drugs that actually hurts your family. You're more likely to neglect your kids. You're more likely to do this or that. So it does hurt other people indirectly. So you can make the argument like that indirectly.
again, that's a consequentialist argument, though. When you're making laws, and there's a reason that laws specifically don't always account just for the consequences, and especially in something like the Bill of Rights, where it's like very deontological perspective of like this is right or wrong in and of itself, right? Free speech is right or wrong in and of itself. The right to bear arms is right or wrong in and of itself. And so I look at the same exact thing when it comes to murder. Murdering is right in especially abortion, I should say, right? Is it right or wrong in and of itself, right? Now, here's the thing: is sometimes there could be circumstances that give light to certain things that wouldn't make it murder. Because some people would be like, "Oh, well, murder is justified in certain situations." Well, like technically, like if somebody breaks into your house, are you permitted to murder that person?
Yeah, well, that's
but then technically at that point, it's not the same definite. It's not murder, right? You're not murdering somebody. You're defending yourself and killing them in self-defense because otherwise they would have murdered you, right? So it's important that, America's founded on these Enlightenment deontological principles, especially in something like the Bill of Rights, right? And I think that extends to human fetuses as well. Because if you start to make consequentialist arguments for these types of things, it's slippery slope to just basically allow everything to happen. You could literally make an argument, because if you just take a purely consequentialist approach, you can literally make an argument for anything, because the second, third, fourth order consequences can always change regardless of what the first order, regardless of the initial cause, so
I don't think it's a slippery slope. I think it's okay to have nuanced positions. Like for guns, I'll give you an example. I think guns are generally pretty wrong. I don't think there's any reason for people to have guns and shoot each other and blah, blah, blah. However, I have a nuanced position because I've seen the data and I know that banning guns does not do anything to protect against gun violence, right? So while I think guns are not that good, I certainly am not an advocate of banning guns because, again, that from a practical perspective, it doesn't do anything. So, I don't know why you can't have like a nuanced perspective and be like, okay, look, I think abortion is really wrong. However, if according to the circumstance, if you could show me the data that suggests that banning abortion doesn't do anything to actually prevent it and just hurts people, then I could grant from a practical perspective, from a lawmaking standpoint, that maybe it shouldn't be illegal, right? If it's not doing anything to actually prevent it and it's just hurting people.
I mean, shouldn't at that point, again, this is granting you a lot to say that would happen, because usually when you legalize something,
Yes.
it reduces the prevalence of it, such as murder, right? But I'll just grant you that.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you say a better solution would be to be like, okay, well, we illegalized abortion because we think, we look at all the evidence, abortion is wrong, it shouldn't happen, there's no way to defend it. And then let's say abortions do go up. Wouldn't it be a better solution to instead just be like, well, I guess abortion should be legal instead? Wouldn't it be better to be like, well, what's causing these abortions to rise and we should stop that?
Yeah, you could, sure. I mean, yeah, studying something is always good. But if at the end of the day, brass tacks, you realize that, because when we are operating on laws, we're working on a macro perspective, right? So we're passing macro laws in order to change the micro, right? And so, or even the macro trends. So if the data comes out that every time you make abortion illegal, number of abortions stays the same, and the number of whatever health consequences goes up, and like you've tried like fucking around with the laws and you've tried everything and you've done this experiment, just hasn't worked, right? It's not yielding positive results. You can still be of the opinion that abortion is really wrong and that people shouldn't do it, but you can also acknowledge that the anti-abortion law is not really working and it doesn't make sense.
But again, that's still a big what if. That's why sometimes when you go into these hypotheticals, it doesn't work, because I know you brought up, again, I'd have to look at the study that you brought up, but it didn't really look like it specifically came to that conclusion to me. I'd have to see the numbers for it. It was just an abstract. But regardless, let's say that, that is a completely legitimate study in South America or whatever.
Yeah.
Again, we're talking about the United States. In the United States, we already know for sure that there were less abortions before Roe v. Wade was legalized. And on top of that, once Roe v. Wade was was overturned, the number of abortions have gone down, right? They've gone down about 13%, or they're predicted to do that. And there's a lot of sufficient evidence to show that that's going to happen, right? So we already know that just by putting some restrictions in place, the number of abortions have already gone down. And more specifically, you can look in certain states as well, right? So there's certain states where it's always been pretty tough to get abortions, right? And so and certain states as well, they actually decrease they put even more restrictions on abortions even before Roe v. Wade. So, or was that? Yeah. Because basically, yeah. Okay. So here's what I mean, right? So in the Midwest, for example, I think it's Missouri. There's a few abortion clinics, but there's only 1 or 2 abortion doctors that go into this one specific part of the country, right? And because largely these abortions have, been ousted in a way. So actually, full disclosure, I'll just fucking say it, right? One of the reasons I know a lot about this stuff is because my dad, works in the pro-life movement. So, he told me this story of this, in St. Louis, more specifically, there's like one Planned Parenthood, and then there's also this one like pregnancy center that's like pro-life, and they're competing against each other. Just by the very presence of them being there, abortions in that whole area have gone down, right? So there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that when you do put restrictions on abortions already, that they do go down, right?
Kevin,
because I think that's the only thing that you're holding on to from
Kevin.
Is that consequentialist argument? I don't.
No, it's not. But I just want to get through that part first, and then we can totally get into the philosophical.
Okay.
No, like this is purely a thought. Let's just say it's a thought experiment at this point. Let's just pretend I haven't showed you any data. I'm just wondering if there is any piece of data that I could potentially show you in a hypothetical world that would get you to acknowledge and say, okay, I still think abortion is wrong, but now I can see why making it legal doesn't make sense. And it sounds like the answer might be no. And if the answer is no, that's okay. But I guess that's kind of what I'm wondering.
I mean, it's kind of like asking me, if you show me some sort of study that says that in some cases cold-blooded murder is okay, I would be like, well, by definition, that wouldn't be murder anymore if it's like a circumstantial type thing, right? If it's deliberately killing an innocent person just because, it's like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that. Right. Like, I can't imagine a world where that's why it comes down to, is killing wrong in and of itself? And then more specifically, is the thing that we are supposedly killing, is that a human life? And if the answer to that is yes, then, you know
Well,
what I mean?
if there was a study, let's say killing, if there was some hard science that came out that said, hey, when you make murder legal, people actually kill less and murder drastically drops. At that point, you can be like, well, look, I still think murder is really wrong, but I don't think it should be illegal because when we make it illegal, more people kill for whatever reason. Like you can have that nuanced position.
I guess so, but still, even so, even in a world with that, right? If especially if the goal of human beings is to try to reduce the amount of suffering and try to create a better and better society, if you automatically already say, oh well, I guess we should just make murder legal, then that completely destroys any possibility of that. So in that hypothetical scenario, if you do find out that, hey, making murder illegal increases the amount of murders, well, instead of just saying, hey, let's make murder legal, then you should still have murder illegal and try to figure out why murders are going up and try to prevent that from happening.
Well, I think you would probably,
you know?
I think you should probably make murder legal in the interim while you study it. If we know that making murder legal decreases murder by 50%, then we can make it legal right away because we can decrease murder by 50% while we study it.
So, man. I mean, like, by that logic, if I'm just like, hey, suppressing free speech completely and living in a totalitarian state makes people happy. So I guess we should just live. I have the study here, like.
Well, no,
So I guess we should do that.
There's some things where the answer would still be no. If you're like Alex, I can show you a study that says that if we deport all black people to Africa, crime will drop by 99%. Does that change your mind? I'm like, my answer is no, because I still think it's so apprehensible that to do something like that. So
exactly.
No,
But that's how pro-lifers and myself.
Okay.
That's how we view
But
abortion.
that's what I'm trying to get
human.
at. Yeah, that's what. Well, that's kind of nature what I'm trying to get at. I'm just wondering if there's any piece of data that I could possibly show you that'll make you say, I still think it's wrong, but I don't think it should be illegal. It sounds
Well, let me turn it back to you, because you just acknowledged that you thought that slavery, that whole scenario of saying, oh well, if we deport all black people to, I don't know, freaking Antarctica or something, crime is going to go down. You would still be against that, as you should. I'd be against that too. So is there evidence? Is there some sort of evidence that would convince you that that's actually okay?
with black people, no.
Yeah. So why are you doing that same exact thought experiment to me? Because you're still making a deontological,
No, but I'm
first principles. Hold on. You're making a first principles argument saying that is wrong in and of itself because you are doing something that is morally reprehensible to a human being, right? And then so to me, you're asking me whether I would acknowledge that it might be legal to do based on consequentialist arguments. But for me, I say no, because this is a human being. Similar to how, black people are human beings, fetuses are human beings too. That's my perspective.
Okay.
You understand that why that doesn't make sense, right? You're asking,
no,
it's kind of contradictory a little bit.
I see the point you're trying to make, but I don't think it doesn't make sense. You asked me, we're trying to figure out what our values are, and
exactly. All I'm saying is,
when you ask me, wait, hang on, let me just when you ask the black person question, and I say, no, even if the data was like 99% reduction in crime, I still wouldn't be in favor of that, right? That's you understand where my values lie in, right?
Yeah.
But with some things, you can have nuanced positions where we can be like, okay, well, this clearly, clearly this, I still think this is wrong, but I acknowledge that this law making it illegal doesn't make sense because this law is not accomplishing the goal.
Yeah.
And it sounds
again, that's why all this comes down to just whether that is a human being or not. Because we both just acknowledged right there that regardless of the consequences, even if the consequences are good, if the thing that's being affected is a human life, then the consequences are irrelevant, right? Because in that scenario there with the slavery thing, you just acknowledge that the consequences are irrelevant. Even if crime goes down and we build utopia by deporting all of the black people to Antarctica, it's still wrong in and of itself, because to be that level of racist and to reduce people just down to their race and say, oh, because you're black, you probably cause crimes. Like even if statistically that might be, you know, there might be something to that. It's wrong because you don't reduce people just down to their group identity.
But no, that's
right?
just my personal values.
I know, and these are my personal values too. That's
yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah, and do you think that would be wrong for them to be that to say that that's worth it? Or do
I would
you think
disagree
that's
with
okay?
it. I would disagree with them, but someone could be. I think we need to do a better analogy. We can say like, if we found a law.
I think this is a perfect analogy.
Well, let's do like,
because everybody disagrees that, or everybody would agree for the most part that is wrong, right? To say, oh well, we should heavily oppress a certain population because it's going to lead to a greater result. Dude, that's the type of shit that like the Nazis did, for example. They said, hey, let's put the Jews in concentration camps and kill them all because the world's going to be a better place if we do that.
Yeah,
you know, they took that perspective.
Flawed logic because Jews make all the money, so you need the Jews. That's just Nazis are.
That's why they're fucked up from the get-go.
Right. But go back.
But yeah, you know what I'm saying, right? Like we understand that certain things.
I do know what you're saying. Yes, but we're talking about
like a consequentialist argument is not a good idea.
Yeah, but we're talking about kind of like laws, right? So let's say we can pass a law that says Black people can't go to college, right? It's a law that Black people are not allowed to go to college, and let's say somehow we find out that because of that law, Black people are like succeeding more than ever. Let's say it just makes them determined, it makes them driven. It's like, fuck yeah, like Black people start doing better than they've ever done as a group of people. We can be like, when we're analyzing that law, we can be like, okay, well, I think Black people should still be free to go to college. I disagree with this law in theory, but I can acknowledge that this law has actually helped Black people. So maybe it should still stay. That's like having a nuanced position right there. You can be like,
I'd still disagree with that because again, that's why like first principles, you know, like I know I keep saying it like on repeat again, that action is wrong in and of itself, regardless of the consequences. To ban somebody from doing something because of the color of their skin, regardless of what sort of statistics that you say, oh, this is going to happen as a result of that, it's still wrong in and of itself. Because look, people are bigger than just their, you know, statistics, right? So I'll grant you that. Okay, so let's say, for example, as a whole, that Black people succeed way more by us being like, you're not allowed to go to college because you're Black. Well, what about the few people that aren't part of that statistical group? What if for some Black people actually, even though they're in the minority, that their life would significantly improve if they were allowed to go to college, right? Dude, I have no doubt that people in like the South during the 60s had those types of arguments being like, well, we're not going to allow them to go to college or allow them to, you know, sit where the white people sit because, you know, we have these studies and evidence that show that, you know, everyone's going to be happier if we just keep them separate. The issue is that the actual thing in and of itself is morally reprehensible, right? And so I hold that same position with the whole fetus abortion thing. And again, that's why I was confused. I was like, well, you know, you apply that logic to yourself, basically saying it's not logically consistent, right? So you were trying to say, okay, well, would you be okay with abortion still remaining legal if the consequences of that were that there's less abortions? But then at the same time, when I did a similar experiment with you saying, oh, well, if we find out that if we deport all Black people, crimes will go down, yet you still think that would be wrong in and of itself. So it's almost like you're holding me to a different standard than you're holding.
I'm not actually holding you to standard. I'm just trying to figure out where your value lies on this issue. I don't think there's anything wrong with you saying, no, I will still not be for legalizing abortion, even if you're more than welcome to say, and there'll be nothing wrong with you saying, yo, even if making abortion illegal reduces abortions, I would still be for keeping abortion illegal. You can have that position.
Yeah. Again, it's similar to how it's wrong in and of itself, regardless of the consequences, to deport all Black people, even if for whatever reason crime statistics go down. It's also wrong to keep abortion legal, even if, God forbid, the amount of abortions go down as a result of that. Because those things are wrong in and of themselves.
Okay, so that's your position. That's all I'm trying to figure out, dude. I'm not like trying to pin you down or something like that. I'm just trying to
you're not. I just want to make sure
I just want to figure out where you stand. Well, no, because we've kind of gone circles on that one. I just want to figure out where you stand on that. So, okay. So So the answer is then, again, if I'm wrong, tell me. There's no amount of data that I could show you that where you would be like, okay, you know what? I'm still anti-abortion, but I think it should be legal, right?
So if it was data that had to do with somehow proving that it wasn't a human life, then that would be fine, right? If there was something that proved that that wasn't a human life, then yes. But in terms of making a consequentialist argument, no.
Kevin, according to your definition of life, though, there's no way I could show you that data because your definition of life is when when the sperm touches the egg. So what kind of data could I even potentially show you?
I don't know. The burden of proof is on you. It's like saying, like, how do I prove to you that murder is okay? I don't fucking know.
According to your definition of life, there is no way any data could be shown to even prove that. I mean, that's fine, but that's the truth, right? The way you've defined life, there is no data.
Well, here's the thing, right? This is why science is important, right? So scientifically speaking, this is why, it's important that we define what human life is. So from a scientific perspective, if I say, hey, there's a bundle of cells that we found on Mars, right? Would you acknowledge it's like, yes, we found life on Mars? Or would you just be like, that doesn't count, right? Of course we say it's a life on Mars, right? So we already inherently have an understanding that that is some sort of life, right? So based on that, when a human, when an egg and a sperm attach to each other, whatever that thing becomes, right? Whatever it grows into, it's already a human in and of itself. It's already a human, right? It's just a human at a very early stage. And that's the same way to say, like, because then otherwise you're just having an arbitrary line. Logically speaking, that makes sense. So the burden of proof is on you to say that that is not a human life. It's not the burden of proof isn't on me.
Okay, well, like if I take, for example, also with the Mars thing, what if we find some microorganisms, like a virus, a small virus or bacteria that's one cell organism? Would that be a human life? I don't know. It depends.
No, I wouldn't say it be human life. I'm just saying it is a life, right?
Right.
So, for example,
not human. Is it a life? Is it a life? I don't know. Really, like at that point, it is arbitrary. Like,
oh, come on, dude. If somebody finds like moving things on Mars, you don't think the headlines are going to be like, "We found life on Mars"?
Bacteria is microscopic. You couldn't even see it with the naked eye, right? So
it doesn't matter. Still, dude, I'm telling you, if people found bacteria on Mars, come on, man, you know that people are just going to be like, "Oh my god, we found life on Mars."
Right, but like, okay, sure. Some people would be like, then some people would be like, I don't know if that's really
everybody. No, dude, everybody would be like, we found life. There's no way. If we found bacteria that was moving around on Mars, bro,
it's equivalent in value in terms of human life, right? We would say that this microscopic one cell organism is not the same thing as a human.
No, of course not. I would say that is life, similar to how
if we found like these advanced species that had fucking tentacles, we might be like, okay, they're like maybe they're intrinsic to value to us because they're advanced, right? So there's different levels of life.
No, I understand, but it's still life, right? So for example, I think this will kind of help simplify it. So let's take a dog, for example. When does a dog start? When is a dog a dog? I would still say a dog is a dog when the dog sperm meets the dog egg, and then you have a little then at that point it is a dog. Then at what point does it become a dog, right? Is it a dog after it's born, whatever? No, it's a dog there. So similarly, it's a unique dog life at that point because it has a unique dog genome. I'm saying the same exact thing with humans. As soon as the egg and the sperm meet, right, that is a human already there.
If I go into Natty's vagina and I scrape some eggs, right, and I just scrape them, I pull them in a bowl, and then I jerk off on that, right? Would that be like that? Would technically be a life according to this definition?
Yeah, if it conceives, yeah.
But it would never be able to be conceived outside the womb, right? So it wouldn't die. But my sperm would touch her egg, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
it's still a life, yeah. And look, that like I said, I can make value judgments on what there being degrees of life. So as long as we both agree that that is a life, but it's not as bad to delete that life at that point as opposed to deleting it at 8 months. Sure. If somebody said to me, hey, this you have to choose, either we abort this 8-month baby or we get rid of this this human embryo that was just conceived through in vitro fertilization 1 hour ago. Choose one. I'm going to choose this, similar to how if there's a 90-year-old man who's on his death, who's like, barely getting by, and a 20-year-old man, right, who's perfectly healthy. If somebody said, hey, choose one to die, I'll be like, well, I'm sorry, old man. I acknowledge that you are alive and you matter, but I value this one more than you, so I'm going to choose you to die. Doesn't necessarily mean that 90-year-old man isn't alive.
Yeah, so just in the same token, if there's a 7-month baby growing inside some chick, and then the other side of the spectrum, we have this like little concoction of all the eggs and sperm I scraped off Natty's pussy and then put my fucking jizz in there. Like, you would say that like that's less important. I'm like, yo, Kevin, I'm gonna flush one of these down the toilet. It's either gonna be the 7-month-old fetus or this disgusting combination of like pussy juice and jizz. You'd be like, okay, flush the pussy juice and jizz, right?
Yeah,
but you would say the pussy juice and jizz is still a life, right?
Well, as long as if it's actually attached into a
like I mix it, I put it in a
yeah.
blender, I'll mix it real good. Like
if it's in seed, yes, it is technically. That would still technically be wrong, but it's not as wrong as aborting an 8-month-old baby. Yeah, but still wrong in the sense that you're still deleting a life. Like I said, the only way that a pro-choice argument could work, and again, I've argued both sides, is to acknowledge one, that it is a life, right? And then you say, and you make a value judgment on certain lives or certain stages of life being more valuable than others.
Okay, we can get right into that. I guess like the only one last thing I want to point out on this is like the way you've defined life, which is the way you've defined life is life is anything that happens from the moment the egg hits the sperm. According to that definition, there's nothing I could show you, no data or no science that would get you to say, oh, abortion is okay, because of the way the definition is already making it impossible for me to disprove it, because just that's the definition, right? So if I make the definition,
I mean that's the scientific definition. It's like it's basically like, why is it unreasonable to say like, hey, prove to me God doesn't exist? Well, the burden of proof is on you, right? Science is on my side, so you have to prove to me that the science is incorrect.
Well, what science is that?
The science that this being itself, that the egg and the sperm, once you have a full genetic structure of what that thing's going to be, that's the beginning of it.
No, what's the science that what's it called, that the minute that the sperm touches the egg, that's a life?
What do you, that's just the fundamental principle to start off of, right?
No, not necessarily. It depends on how you define what life.
Well, like at what point? It's not like the genome and everything just completely changes.
It really just depends on how you define life. Like it just depends what your definition of life is. There's no way science could answer that question.
Yeah. So no, hold on. So that's exactly it. Your definition of life. So then people's definition of life.
I don't have a clear definition of life, by the way. I'm saying there's different definitions that make sense.
Well, if everybody has a different definition of life, right, then it just becomes an arbitrary thing and unscientific. So the whole point of science is to try to root things down in objectivity as much as possible. But so the best way to root it down in objectivity, the best scientific argument is to say, hey, when this thing at the point of which it starts to develop and grow, right? That is the point of what it's at. So, for example, here's a perfect example, right? I know it sounds kind of weird,
real quick. 1 second, I'm just getting water.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Consciousness. Do you guys really think you're making an argument when you say consciousness? I already debunked this earlier. Come on.
Okay.
You are unconscious when you hold on. I just want to use these comments here. Well, you are unconscious when you are asleep. Does that give me the right to kill you?
Are you asking?
Or does what give you value at potentially your future consciousness, your potential for future consciousness? Well, interesting. What has a potential for future consciousness? Oh, a fetus.
Kevin, I mean, you could, again, that goes back to having a nuanced position. You can be like,
no, I wasn't arguing against you. I was arguing against
I just want to point it out. You can be like, okay, you're not conscious when you're asleep, but that's still, I don't think you should kill someone while they're asleep because of this and this and this reason. So that goes back. You can have like a nuanced opinion on that. Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can be like, yeah, you're not conscious when you're asleep, but that still doesn't mean I have the right to kill you or murder is acceptable because of blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so go back. What was the argument that you were making?
Yeah. So I was gonna say, okay, well, let's take the universe for example, right? You're aware of the Big Bang.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Big Bang, the whole idea is there was like this object or whatever with like an infinitely large amount of mass. It was like so dense that it's crazy. It literally,
Yeah. I'm familiar with this.
just imagine the heaviest thing of all time, right?
No.
And then so one day that thing went from that and then it started to expand, right? So something caused that thing to expand and then create the universe. So at the moment that that thing went from one state to another, then it is the universe, right? So wouldn't you argue that that is the universe? The same exact thing with egg and the fetus, right? So I'm sorry, the egg and the sperm. At what point, if we acknowledge the Big Bang, at what point did that become the universe? Was it the universe when it was just that ball of mass? Probably not, or maybe it was. I don't know.
Well,
Right?
that's why it's not a scientifical. It's a philosophical question. Assuming the Big Bang theory is true, which I actually have my doubts about, but that's a whole side tangent.
Okay.
Assuming the Big Bang theory is true, that everything was the size of a pin, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was that the universe when it was a pin. So they say that the universe was created 15 billion years ago. So 17 billion years ago, when it was the size of a pin, was that the universe? Well, that's not a scientific question. That's a philosophical question. Some people would say yes, because everything still came from that. And some people would say no, because nothing was really created yet besides a pin.
But okay, that's fine. But nobody would deny that once it started to expand, that was already the universe, right? And then the universe expanded from there and just kept going and kept going and kept going. And apparently is still going at that point. So I'll spell this out, right? The equivalent of that is an egg and a sperm, by themselves, they're just this, right? But then as soon as they conceive and they start to expand, similar to how a human starts to expand, at that point, it is a human. So unless we're saying, hey, from here, when the universe started to expand, it wasn't the universe, it was something else. And then, once it was like a fucking, because when I say universe, that means existence itself, right? Existence itself, everything that we ever see, existence itself, right? So once it started to expand, was that still the universe, just in a smaller developed form? Or was that just not a universe at all? It was just a bunch of cells. It was just a blobbity blue, right? No, it's like existence itself, right? So already inherently, from a scientific perspective, we sort of understand that the essence of something is what creates it, right? Is what gives it its purpose and its meaning. And that essence of something starts at the moment that it is created. So at the moment that the egg and the sperm meet, it is created, and at that point, it starts to expand rapidly. As soon as conception happens, it already starts to expand.
But so what if then, according to this, what if we can abort, like the sperm touches the fetus, and then 2 hours later, we can get an abortion before it has a chance to expand during
Well, it's already expanded at that point. It expands immediately. I
think there's I don't know super well the science of this, but I think there's a gestation period where like it kind of like marinates and then it starts expanding. Like I think
maybe I don't know. Yeah.
There's a gestation period of like 12 or 14 days. I don't know what it is. If any women are watching this, don't fucking I know I'm just a white man. What do I know about these things? But yeah, like there's a gestation period. I'm pretty confident of that before it expands. So according to that logic, then before the expansion starts happening, then it's not a life, right? So then the definition becomes different.
No, it's still life. Because as soon as it becomes nothing and then something from the creation of these two things, that's when it becomes what it is. Right? So the essence of that, everything that you will ever become, your hair, everything, it's determined at that moment. And then it starts expanding from there.
Well, even that's not necessarily true. Environmental factors like is a mom a drinker, what kind of her diet is, all that stuff will actually affect, it can affect whether
epigenetics. Epigenetics. So that epigenetics is basically the genetic coding that's already within your genetics that realizes itself in certain environments. But that DNA is already there.
Right, but it could totally manifest differently. It could be a difference between a healthy, functioning, brilliant child who could be the next Einstein, or someone who has Alzheimer's or has dementia or something like that, and has all kinds
So
of.
I don't really see what your point is. That just saying that the
The
person
point
with
I'm making,
Alzheimer's life is worth less?
no. Let's not say Alzheimer's. Let's just say you can have a difference. Okay, I'll just say it like this: you can have a difference between a brilliant child and a retarded child. The DNA is the same. The only difference is what the mother does during those 9 months. So that's the point I'm making, is that it's not even as black and white as that. Nothing is like the whole life of the baby isn't determined at the point the sperm touches the eggs. There's also what the mother does during those 9 months, which is going to play a pretty heavy role on how the baby is going to turn out. So I just don't think it's as simple as that.
So let's say, for example, that the mom just does a bunch of, they end up having like one of those alcohol babies that are all deformed and shit.
Yeah.
Why does that matter? Of course, that fucking sucks for the sake of that fetus, right? Like poor kid. But does that mean that we should kill the kid?
No.
I don't really see your point.
We're not arguing for that. I'm just trying to explain to you that your definition, forget about the abortion thing for a second. Just focus on the white part. I'm just trying to explain to you that your idea of life isn't as simple as you think it is, because you're saying, well, the minute that your argument is the minute the sperm touches the egg, that's like, basically the future of the baby is already created. I'm saying it's not actually like that, because there's other factors, like what happens during that sperm and egg during the 9 month that it sits inside the mom's, body. That makes a huge difference. So forget about the abortion thing. I'm not trying to make a value judgment here. I'm just talking about what life is and where life starts. And I think that the life thing is not something, this is something I've debated with a lot of pro-lifers on, is not something that can be determined by science. It's more of a philosophical issue, what your definition of life is. For you, that definition of life is, I guess the way you've defined it is, the life is anything that happens after the moment that the sperm touches the egg. Is that correct? Or I'm not strawmanning you, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
As soon as there is conception there and a new unique genetic code is created, that is life. Yeah.
Right. So that's your definition of life, and I think that's a reasonable position. It's not. It's one I've heard in the past. Sure. Other people might have a different definition of life. They might say life starts at the point that there is sentience, right? The point that the being can perceive and feel things. Okay, that's also a reasonable position. Some people might say life is something once there is, you have consciousness or you have intelligence or whatever, right? You can have different definitions. It's not a scientific question. It's a philosophical question. Where do you think life starts? What do you think?
Yeah. So again, that's actually the issue right there.
Like, for example, let me just say one more thing. Okay. Like, for example, with the whole vegan versus non-vegan thing, science can't answer the question of, like, is it wrong to eat animals? There's no way that question can be answered by science. That's a philosophical question. Whether you think that the baby cow or the pig or whatever is life, has moral equivalency to that point of a human, or we shouldn't kill it. It's not a scientific question. It's a philosophical question. This is the same thing.
Okay. So that's exactly the issue right there, is everybody has a different definition of where that life is going to start. And again, if you take it from a scientific perspective where you're observing, you use the scientific method to say, okay, well, what is life itself, right? What is the essence of something that then realizes itself and fully actualizes itself into another thing in the future, right? So for example, what is a tree? Right, the tree goes from a seed to growing once you start to water it, right? So basically, it just expands and expands and expands, but it's still a tree.
Well, we might not say it's a tree. Like, if you take the seed and you put a little water on it and you keep it on a paper towel for a day, maybe you see a tiny thing sprout up, but you probably wouldn't call it a tree at that point. Or you might. It depends. But science can't answer that question for you, right? So
that's the beginning of the growth cycle of it.
It is the beginning of the growth cycle, sure. Just like the sperm touching the egg is the beginning of the growth cycle of the baby or the potential baby, whatever you want to call it, right? But again, there's no, like, science hasn't come out, like, okay, like most scientists have come out and said, we believe the Big Bang Theory is real. We believe climate change is real. Science hasn't come out and said, oh, we believe that life starts at the moment that the sperm touches the egg. That's not a mainstream scientific position.
No, it is. It is. Yeah. So mostly, even a lot of people, scientists who are pro-choice, say that life begins at conception, because scientifically, that's what it is. Like when you're going from the standpoint of, like, what is the essence of something, because if you're just looking at it purely from a scientific perspective, right? How do you describe a human being? A human being is a collection of cells that get created based off of a genetic code, right? So that the first principle, the first thing is that genetic code, right? So once that genetic code is created, that is when that thing exists with which everything expands from there.
Kevin, I think you're mistaken about this point. So, like, if you can show me like the articles or something, I will change my position. But I researched this fairly thoroughly, and science does not have like a mainstream position on this. That like life starts from.
What do you mean science doesn't have it, right? Like
Like
who is science?
Like a collection of scientists. Like meaning
No,
something
that's
that's
not science. That is not science.
Something that's a well-established.
Science is not. No. Science is not a collection of scientists.
Something that's a well-established scientific position.
Okay, sure. You can say that, yes. Yeah. But science itself is a method of inquiry. It's actually a type of philosophy. There's a whole sect of philosophy called the philosophy of science, which critiques the scientific method. But it is a method of inquiry. So when you're using that, if that is not scientific, then you can't make a scientific claim about anywhere else.
Okay.
Within the cycle of development.
The point I'm making is that it's not a popular scientific consensus that life begins at the point of conception, or that life is anything that happens once the sperm touches the egg. Again, because that's not a question that science can answer. It's a philosophical question. It's not a question that can be answered by science. I don't know. Maybe you're like, maybe I'm not making my point clear, or like I don't know how else to explain it. But yeah, it's just like if you can show me that that's like a popular scientific theory that most scientists get behind, then I'll change my opinion. But like that's not the case. Science doesn't even really. There's pro-life, there's pro-choice scientists, yes, but there's not like a scientific consensus that the definition of life is anything that happens once the sperm touches the egg. Because again, it's not a question that can be answered by science. It's a philosophical question.
Again, we're just going to run in circles here. The essence of the thing itself, the human genome, the unique human genome, right? That is the starting point with which everything builds off of.
Right. I understand that. But what is life? That is a question.
There's a reason that the human genome, right? It has a unique property to it. There's a reason that it doesn't start off. The sperm and the egg touch each other and then it grows into a fucking alligator. No. It grows into a human because it is human DNA, right?
Right, but
so at what point? So why do we make the distinction then? That's why, from a scientific perspective, that is a human, because there's other eggs and sperm that end up attaching to each other of different species, right? So the thing in and of itself of what is the human? What is the alligator at its earliest stages? What's the dog at its earliest stages? That happens at the moment of conception. So specifically, this is a human life that starts here.
I understand all that. I get that. I think no one's disagreeing with that. But yeah. The question that science cannot answer.
So hold on. So there's something fundamentally human about that, right? Because if there wasn't something fundamentally human about that genetic structure there, then it's no different than an alligator, because it depends on what it's going to grow into, right? So yes. We're already making a distinction at the very least to say this is a human genome that it's starting off from. This is an alligator genome it's starting off from. This is a dog genome starting off from, right? So how do you make a distinction between those things? Well, you make the scientific observation that this genetic code is human. This genetic code is an alligator. This genetic code. So at the very least, we acknowledge that at a starting point.
Yes,
right?
It's human.
There's a starting point of an alligator, starting point of a pig, starting point of a dog, starting point of a human. So that's why I'm saying it's not just like, it's uniquely human already from that standpoint.
Totally get all that part. It's the life part. It's not the human part. Yes, we understand that the sperm touching the egg, there's a human component to it. But what exactly is life is not a question that can be answered by science. That's the point. The life aspect of itself. Like, for example, okay, let's do this. Let's search definition of life, right? This is what comes up. This is the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so here we have, you're going to see different definition. The conditioner distinguishes animals, plants from inorganic matter, including the capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activity, and continual change preceding death. Well,
hold on 1 second. I'm going to save you here because you if you're just going off that definition, you're going to debunk yourself.
How?
the condition that distinguishes animal and plants from inorganic matter, right?
Yes.
Where does it distinguish it from inorganic matter? When it has its own unique genome already, that already by definition, that genetic code itself at the moment of conception already differentiates between the genetic code of inorganic matter automatically.
Right.
So by this definition, my what I say about life is correct from a scientific perspective.
Okay.
Now I will grant you this. Right? You type in something like life, different definitions could come up.
Yes.
Right. So, but I'm just saying this definition proves my point. I'm not saying that proves my point just by itself, because anybody could have written that definition.
But let me finish.
That definition doesn't help your case.
Well, I haven't been able to make my case. Let me just get my case out. So, including the capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activity, continual change preceding death, right? Okay, so let's take a look at each one of these independently. Reproduction, no, a fetus can't reproduce, but growth, yes, it can reproduce. Functional activity, debatable. Continual change preceding death, yes. So, a fetus would maybe meet 2 out of these 4 criteria, maybe 3, depends on really what your definition of functional activity is. So yeah, so that's what I'm saying. This is not a question. Like if we go off this definition, it meets maybe half the criteria, maybe 60% of the criteria, right? It really depends on which definitions we go off. But the point, again, going back to my initial point, this is not a question that can be like answered by science. What is life? This is again, if we're going off that definition, like you're saying that it proves your point, it doesn't, because the second part of that definition, it gives 4 criteria.
100% proves my point. Bring it back up.
Only 2. Okay, but you have to go off both parts of the definition, not just the first part.
Sure.
Okay.
And again, I'm on your side here. I'm not saying that this is like the end all be all definition, because it's not fair for me, because it could have easily popped up as something else. But by this definition, it does prove my point.
Okay, go ahead.
So the condition that distinguishes animals and plants from inorganic matter automatically with the genome. With the genetic structure of it, it already is differentiated from the genetic structure of other inorganic matter, right? Including the capacity for growth. All right. As soon as it is conceived, it has a capacity for growth. If you leave it uninterrupted, you don't abort it, it will grow, right?
Okay.
Reproduction as well, unless there's something defunct with it, which you don't even realize until it's like an adult, it should be able to reproduce. Right?
How is a fetus going to reproduce?
No, once it's fully formed outside of the womb as an adult.
But this
is something you inherently understand. So okay, so if that definition was 100% correct, and again, that's why I said it's not 100% correct. It has the capacity to do it, right? So it still has reproductive organs and stuff. But just because, let's say, for example, you're sterile as an adult, does that mean that you're not a life anymore? But you still technically have the capacity to do it.
But a fetus doesn't even have the reproductive organs.
Yeah, it does.
No,
it's in the genetic code.
They don't form,
and then the reproductive organs.
Months in. They don't form right away, dude.
No, I know they don't form right away. But the determiner of whether you're going to be a boy or a girl
is the definition is the capacity, not future capacity. At a 2-month
capacity fetus, has future capacity, future imbued within the definition. Mm-hmm. Capacity is by definition a potential thing that'll get realized later, aka the future. So you don't need to say future capacity. Capacity is already implied within.
Okay, let's go to definition of capacity. I think we have to start there.
It's the potential for something to be realized.
The amount that something can produce, the maximum. Yeah, so it's something that can be done in that moment, not in the future. I think you're off about that one. Future. Yeah, future does not. It's capacity. Like right now, I have the capacity, for example, to curse. Right, I can do it this very second, but you can't say I have the capacity to like, I don't know, like fucking.
It has the capacity to do it based on its genetic code.
Just
because it's not realized in that moment.
I don't have the capacity to like. I don't have the capacity to like drive my Bugatti at 100 miles per hour because I don't have the Bugatti. Right, so I can't say I have the capacity to drive my Bugatti really fast on the freeway because I don't have a Bugatti. Right, I could get a Bugatti in the future, and I probably will, but I don't have the capacity to do it yet. It's the same thing here. A 18-year-old has the capacity to reproduce. A 5-year-old does not have the capacity to reproduce. A 2-month fetus does not have the capacity to reproduce.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, if we need to say future, then that's fine. So can you go back to the definition?
Yeah.
Again, a lot of times when you use capacity colloquially, like that's something that is predictive of something. It's in and of itself, but then also has the potential for it as well, right?
Yeah. But anyway, so that's what I was saying. It meets like 2 out of 4. So for growth, yes, I will acknowledge it has the capacity for growth. Reproduction, no. Functional activity. Well,
wait, I can't see it on my screen. You're sharing something else.
Oh, sorry.
I can't see the life one. Yeah.
Okay. Hang on. Let me go back to that. Life definition. Okay. Here it is.
And again, like, look, the capacity for growth, like it's like you have the ability to grow, right?
Yeah,
Immediately
growth.
when you're there, you have the capacity to grow.
Well,
right?
that's why I was saying that 2 out of these 4 criteria are met.
Okay.
I wasn't saying 0 out of them are met. Yes, you absolutely. A fetus has the capacity for growth.
Okay, yeah, I know, but look, that's why this is a weird definition, just from that part, right? Again, you say capacity for reproduction. Does that mean that when you haven't hit puberty yet, you're not a life yet? You know, like little children can't reproduce. They literally don't have the.
But you don't have the capacity for reproduction when you haven't hit puberty. But you do have the capacity.
No, they have the capacity for it in the future, yeah, but they still have the capacity for it.
No, they can't do it. Okay, I mean, it just depends on how we define capacity. I never defined.
They're just not fully developed yet.
I never defined capacity as like things you could potentially do in the future, right?
Mhm.
Because, like for example, that like the 11-year-old kid who get kicked in the balls and loses ability to reproduce. So unless he can reproduce, like he has the option of doing it like right then and there, like he can go out and get a chick pregnant like that night. Then he doesn't have the capacity for reproduction. However, a 10-year-old has the capacity for functional activity, but not a fetus. Continual change preceding death. Yes, the fetus does have the capacity for continual change preceding death, just like a 12-year-old. So that's why I was saying in these 2 out of these 4. So that's going back to the point. And then I see that the viewers are rapidly dropping off. So we probably should move on to the next point because we're losing them this technical definition.
We lost them as we were debating about the word capacity.
Yeah, the only point that I was just trying to make is that, again, I don't think this is a question that can be answered by science. It's more of a philosophical question. But okay, let's move on to this. Let's move on to the next argument. I will grant you that let's just say that we go off your definition of life, and let's just say I agree to that definition. So yes, I will say then in that case, the fetus is a life, right? But I still don't think it's. Would you agree that it's not the same value? Like a 2-month fetus is not the same value as a 2-year-old?
Yeah, if I had to make a value distinction between both of them, I would choose the 2-year-old over the 2-month-old, but doesn't necessarily negate whether they're both human lives or not. Like I said before, I always use this art, like let's say a 2-month-old baby versus a 2-year-old baby, right? They're both still humans.
Okay, so let me then ask the question like this: do you think the end goal of U.S. public policy should be to save lives, save American lives, more specifically?
Well, this is a bit more political, but I think the role of the government should be to have as little involvement as possible, but more specifically, it is there to make sure that it enforces the principles of the society, right? So, for example, if a society says, "Hey, we have these certain rules," and if people break these rules, then something needs to happen. Some consequences need to happen. The government should be the one that enforces those consequences.
Well, the society is split on this, so the government really is the one that's coming in and saying, "Hey, this is either going to be allowed or not allowed," right? So it seems like you're on the side of like the government should, protect human life, which is, I think, a fine position. I don't think there's anything wrong with that position, but just admit it. Like that's your position. You think the U.S. government should protect U.S. citizens' lives, right? Because a fetus is a potential U.S. citizen, right?
Mm-hmm.
It
should make sure that if something is violated within the Bill of Rights, for example, that it is the enforcing body to make sure that doesn't happen. So basically, it's the
Bill of Rights doesn't
right?
say anything about fetuses, right? So we have to interpret what they meant. They said life, protection of life, right? So you're counting. Mm-hmm. So, like for example, you wouldn't be in favor of the U.S. government starting war with France if France has like a policy that allows abortion in order to get them overturned. So you're not saying we should protect all lives across the world. We should just protect
Well,
U.S.
ideally, yeah, but I mean, if we're just talking about what's legal and illegal, like in order for there to be a worldwide ban, I'd have to be able to create my own world government
Well,
in
no, but
order to do
we
that.
could go in
It's like
and
we live in America, so we're just talking about America. Yeah.
well, we could go in and fucking invade every country that has we have the military pro-choice
so,
policies and make them change their laws. We could do that. We do that with
Yeah.
countries that support terrorists, for example. So we could do that. Like, it's just not something I think you're probably in favor of, right? I'm assuming.
Well, no. Also, just dude, there's a lot of bad things that are happening in this world, and you also have to be practical as well, right?
Right.
Do I want all suffering in the world to diminish and go down? Yes. Does that mean that I need to go around and invade every country to make sure that suffering stops? No. Ideally, maybe the human project should be to do that as time goes on, for sure. But just because I don't have the capacity to do that doesn't mean that I think it's like okay. Like I also don't think that I also think it's wrong that the Chinese government is oppressing the Uyghur population. Does it mean that I think it's okay just because I'm not over there actively trying to help them? No.
Well, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. Is you have a nuanced position on that. You think that the Chinese government pressing the Uyghur, it sounds like we're saying Uyghur, but it's actually like a religious minority Uyghur group is wrong. But you don't think we should go in and start a war with them over it, right? So let's say I make you dictator of the US.
I'm not totally against that.
I mean,
seriously, I think war
with the Chinese government.
Yeah. Dude, honestly, I think they're
you realize they'll be like nuclear Armageddon.
No, but I understand, but this is a whole other thing. But they are the Chinese Communist Party is far more murderous than even the Nazis were, just from a numbers standpoint.
Yeah, they're not good people.
They're like the last great evil. Like they're the last great empire.
They're far from the last great evil. There's many other evils, but they're one of them.
Like the last great one. Russia is, I think, 1/20th the size of China. Russia's economy is smaller than Italy's economy.
Right, but
it's just that they have a lot of nuclear weapons, and there's sort of that inherent.
Russia's not doing great things right now, and they're my people.
I get that, but they're not nearly as powerful as China. Not even close.
In terms of we're going on side tangent. In terms of military, yes. In terms of economy, no. But anyway, so the question is like this: if I make you dictator of the U.S., I make you president that gets to pass any law you want. Like we just disband with the House of Representatives and the Senate. You have universal authority, right? So you get to make law, right? You get to do what you think is right for the U.S. government. So you are gonna at that point you're gonna make abortion illegal. Why? Because you want to protect American lives. Is that correct?
If I was like king of the United States,
yes.
Yeah, I would make abortion illegal.
But you would not invade foreign countries who have abortion and change their governmends. You would not do that? Or
from a practical standpoint, no, because it's like, well, what are the consequences of you doing that? The consequences is you end up opening up the rest of the world to attack you, and then whatever you actually enact a change in the US can automatically get destroyed because you went on this crusade to try to change the entire world. It's kind of like what Napoleon did, right? Napoleon tried to basically take over the entire world. He could have just been king of France or emperor of France, and that's it. But he kept trying to invade, and then eventually the world was pissed off enough at him that they all congregated and beat him, right? So from a practical standpoint, it doesn't make sense to go do that. But ideally, if the world could have no abortions, if the world could have no murder, yeah, I would love that. That sounds great.
Okay, so but remember, you're only the president of the U.S. country. You're not the president of other countries. So you may want to do it, but you wouldn't do it. That's basically it.
Yeah, no. Okay. I mean, it depends on the circumstances, right? So, for example, if it was like a huge human rights issue that just couldn't be avoided, and more specifically, it comes down to the role. This is a different thing. It comes down to the role of government too, right? If I'm the king, am I responsible for other people outside of my community or my society? No, but that's not my job, right? But again, this comes down to there's God-given rights, God/universe given rights, and then there's also like governmental type rights first. This comes first. So just because I'm I'm limited in my capacity to do good because of this doesn't necessarily mean that it negates these things, right? It's possible I don't have the power to change the world in the sense of making abortion illegal everywhere, but that doesn't necessarily make abortion okay, you know?
Yeah,
I don't really see I don't see the point of this thought experiment, to be
you're
honest.
gonna see exactly where I'm going. I think some people in the chat
Okay.
might already know where I'm going. But like, I want to just establish this: the end goal
Okay.
is to protect American lives by making abortion illegal. That's why you're doing it, right?
Yeah, I want to protect unborn lives. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, we like, I'm granting you the point that it's a life, so we'll just call it a life, right? So this was the question I have, and I want to see whether you're going to be consistent with this or not. And I'll be honest, most people who ask this question are not consistent, but we'll see where you stand on this. Would you, at the same time, institute universal health care in America?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a very political thing. I think practically speaking, if there was no economic consequences to it, then yeah.
But why is it for saving? Okay, so here's where I have beef with some conservatives. I'm not even saying you're conservative, but with this position, why is it when it comes to universal health care? Well, if it makes practical sense, let's do it. If it makes practical sense to save American lives, why shouldn't the values just over trump the economics? Like, what is universal health care? It's saving tens of thousands of American lives. But then when it comes to like abortion, well, the economics and all that doesn't matter because it's an evil. Like, why is there this double standard?
It's about the overall goods, right? So if you're taking it from an economic standpoint, if universal healthcare gets to the point where it completely bankrupts the U.S. and gets to a new Great Depression, in depressive type areas and recessions, the suicide rate skyrockets, right? Crime goes up. So if the net result of universal healthcare, let's say that it saves let's say it saves 100,000 people, but causes a depression and then kills like millions of people, then that's it, right?
But Kevin,
I don't think universal healthcare is a right or good in and of itself, because it's I do think that everybody has. So this is a misconstrued idea, right? So when you hear universal healthcare, do you think that means that doctors can deny you when you if you have an emergency?
Or are you asking me?
Mm-hmm.
What was the question again?
So universal healthcare, right? Because people don't maybe know this about the medical system or whatever. So if let's say, for example, that I don't know, somebody stabbed me and I'm like, oh, I don't have health insurance, and then they bring me to a hospital, can the doctors deny me?
If there's universal health care,
if I have no insurance
in America,
mm-hmm.
as is.
Yeah, as is.
Oh, well, in America, like if it's something life or death like that, they can't deny you at the hospital. However, there's a whole bunch of sneaky shit that they may do to like patch you up and not really fix you. But no, like if you're going in there from a gunshot wound in America, like they have to treat you. Yeah. But
so what about universal healthcare exactly is going to be saving a bunch of lives? And again, I'm not against universal healthcare. I actually might be for it, but I just don't really. I don't see why the equivalent of being like, oh well, why do you have to be pro-life and pro-universal healthcare? They're two completely different things.
Well, let me explain why. Because notice how when we start talking about universal healthcare, you're like, well, from a practical perspective, it could do this or this or that. But notice how I was asking you when it comes to abortion, is there any kind of data I could show you, like, i.e., anything practical I could show you that will make you change your mind? You're like, no, I think it's wrong either way, right? Because life.
No, hold on. I said if there's something that you could prove to me that embryo isn't human, then yes. But if you make a consequentialist argument, because you agreed to this earlier, right? Where you said basically, hey, if crime goes down, if we deport all black people, is it okay to deport them? And you said no. You're making a fundamental moral claim to say that regardless of the consequences, the act in and of itself is bad enough where it negates whatever potential benefits the consequences might have. So basically, it's like the opposite of Machiavellianism, the opposite of the ends justify the means, right? And so that's what I'm saying too with me is I have that same sort of position when it comes to the whole abortion thing. Is if I determine that is a human life, and I believe that's a human life, regardless of what benefit there might be, some consequences positive consequences of making abortion illegal, the very fact that you are killing what I believe to be human beings as a result of that negates it.
Right. I totally understand all that. But
Yeah.
why is it that you have a consequential argument for universal healthcare, but an idealistic one for when it comes to abortion? Because at the end of the day, universal healthcare is let's not sugarcoat it, will save people's lives. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, there's a whole bunch of consequential reasons not to do it, but it will save lives. But for some reason with abortion, that, the consequential part doesn't matter. It's purely idealistic.
It's life. Americans are given the freedom of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's not life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and universal health care. That's not it.
Well, it's not life. Well, how can you have life if you don't have medicine? If you have some kind of underlying.
But you can have medicine. Like I said, you can. If somebody stabs me right now, and it's a life or death situation, right? Life or death situation. I can go to the hospital and they'll treat me. Now, if there was a whole thing saying, hey, if you don't have health insurance and you show up and you're about to die unless we don't treat you, then yeah, I would be against that. I'd be like, what the fuck? Like, you got to treat this person.
You're oversimplifying. It doesn't actually work that way. You should watch out the movie John Q. They really
I've seen it before.
Okay, so yeah, so you've seen it. So yeah, it doesn't really work that way. Hospitals quite often, especially when you don't have healthcare, they just stitch you up just enough and then you get fucked. But really, the people who really get fucked are the people who have chronic health conditions like diabetes and stuff like that, who come from poor economic families who don't have health insurance, and then they don't get treatment for those conditions until it's too late, until they get to a point where all the hospital can do is keep them comfortable for like a week. Those are the people who wind up dying from a lack of healthcare.
You're preaching to the choir here, okay? I think that our healthcare system is totally fucked up because I used to, when I was a personal trainer, I worked with a lot of people in the medical profession. And yeah, they would have horror stories of this stuff all the time. I don't necessarily know if universal healthcare is like the solution to it. I'm not a politician. I don't know all these different aspects of it. But I just don't really see the point that you're trying to make here. Like, what's the equivalency between? Are you making sort of like the same argument that pro-choicers tend to make of saying, hey, well, you care about the you care about the fetus when it's inside the womb, but you don't care about what happens outside.
Exactly.
Is that what you're making?
Yeah,
okay.
100%.
I want to tell you a story. All right. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but this is a pretty not so well-known story. So this happened, I think it was during World War II. There were a bunch of Jews who escaped Europe and came over to the U.S.
Yeah, my ancestor. Right? Yeah.
During World War II?
No, I'm just kidding. We were hiding.
It's probably before that. It's probably way before that.
We're hiding.
No, you came from. Okay, yeah, right on. Well, anyway, so there was a story. It was like some ship or whatever. I forgot what it's called. So it comes over to the U.S. and then the U.S. says, "Hey, we have to turn you guys back because what is it? Because we don't have any space for you, so we're going to turn them back." Right. So it's a similar thing of like, okay, well, just because practically speaking, the U.S. couldn't, handle them, does that automatically then mean that it's okay to kill all of those Jews? No. Those two things can be true at the same time. It's bad to kill Jews, and also practically speaking, we don't have the capacity to like hold on to them and give them a refugee.
Well, we did. Well, so right? that's not really true. We just didn't want to because it would increase the tax burden. What do you mean? 170 years ago, we didn't have the room in America. We physically had the room. We could let them in. We just chose not to because we decided to prioritize our own resources over their lives, which is, I think, a bad decision that the U.S. government made. I think most people would agree with that, hey, like it would have been a little worth it to maybe have a little bit more of a drain on the system for a period, but let those guys in rather than have them be like murdered by Hitler. So
maybe this is a better example. Let me ask you this. Okay. Why is it that, like, practically speaking, why is it that the Germans started exterminating the Jews, or they just started exterminating people in general?
I think Hitler was like super racist and he needed to escape.
Yeah, but they didn't just exterminate Jews. They basically exterminated. So at first, a lot of them, they were using them for forced labor and those types of things. And then as the war progressed, they started to exterminate a lot of them, or just let them starve.
Hitler wasn't too fond of Jews. I mean, yeah.
No, it wasn't just Jews. It was a whole bunch of it. Was
but it was mainly
they had communists, they had
Yeah.
Catholics, they had basically anybody that wasn't pro-Nazi.
Right.
So they couldn't provide. Right. The reasons that they started to like really amp up the killing and stuff, especially as the war progressed, is because with the war effort and stuff going on, they couldn't provide for those people. So they were like, hey, it actually makes more financial sense for us to kill them than to keep them alive. Right. So two things can be true at the same time. One, killing people is wrong. Right. And just because you can't provide for them afterwards when they're alive doesn't necessarily automatically make killing them okay, because that's the justification that the Nazis had to start exterminating their POWs and stuff, right? They're like, oh, well, we can't take care of these people, right? There's no way. We have to preserve the Aryan race and we have to prioritize our German citizens. Therefore, let's kill these people. Does that make killing them okay then?
Are you asking me? No, of course not. Mm-hmm. I'm not in favor of killing.
So it's the same exact thing when it comes to the pro-life argument, man. Because just because that's a second thing, right? Just because we don't know, we don't have systems set in place to help these human beings once they are born, doesn't mean that automatically makes okay that we kill them before they're born. Because at the end of the day, all that matters is whether that is a human life or not.
But
you keep bringing up these consequentialist arguments, man. It just doesn't. But there's a reason consequentialist arguments just don't.
Right, but that's kind of what I'm going to. Now, I think you're misinterpreting my argument. Now, I think let's just agree, human life is a human life. It's the most important thing. So, if we do have the capacity, which we do, to save, let's just say 20,000 is the last time I heard the statistics, 20,000 American lives a year by instituting universal health care, we can do it. It's just expensive. We have to pay a lot more in taxes, but we can do it.
That's it. I thought it'd be a lot more than that.
It's something like 20,000 or 30,000. Yeah, it's not that many.
That's nothing.
But that's 20, 30,000 a year, dude. I mean, that's pretty significant. But anyway, so if we could save 20, 30,000 American lives a year, and the ultimate end goal is saving American lives, then why would we not do that? If the end goal is saving lives, like if this is yes.
So I can already tell you right now. Again, I am pro. If it's practical, I'm pro universal healthcare. The realist in me doesn't think it's possible. The idealist in me does. Here's an exact reason. Like if it's only 20 or 30,000, hold on. If it's only 20 or 30,000, let's say you implement universal healthcare, and then the consequence of that is the economy crashes. There will be more people who die because of the economy crashing than you would save lives from universal healthcare.
Let's assume that's not the case. I've never seen a European country.
No. It would be the case 100%. If it's 20 to 30,000, and that's the only. That's why I was shocked it was that low. I thought it'd be higher. But if it's only that low, then and universal healthcare would crash the economy, right? I'm surprised the economy is not already crashed, but let's just say that it does, right? Let's just say that it does. This is the reason that it's not that conservatives are like heartless people that just like, oh well, you want universal healthcare? Fuck you. You should die, you pleb.
Okay, Kevin. Just the key question. What if this is the key question? What if letting all these unwanted babies be born as a result of removing abortion would also crash the U.S. economy? Would then you be against legalizing, making abortion illegal?
No, because it's the first principle thing, right? Because when it comes to universal healthcare, that is not having universal healthcare or not having it isn't inherently going to make you die or not, right? It's not actively.
You have a chronic health condition.
Again, absolutely. You keep bringing it up to a consequentialist argument.
No, I think it's
the whole entire point. The whole entire point of any debate of any politics and stuff is to help with human flourishing, right? That's the number one thing, is to help humanity. So at the very same time, if you are killing humanity at that same point, then it just negates the entire thing. Unless, of course, you're making a utilitarian argument of saying, hey, we're going to make decisions purely based off of just the collective. Increasing the collective happiness of society.
Okay.
I don't agree with the utilitarian.
Well, I think we're starting to go into the weeds. Let me explain it differently. Me personally, I don't make arguments generally from an idealistic perspective. I typically argue from a pragmatic perspective, which is why I'm not in favor of universal healthcare, because my end goal is not automatically saving American lives. I'm more of a pragmatist, right? That's not my end goal. You're arguing mainly from idealistic.
Hold on.
Hang on. Wait, just hang on. Let me get this point across. So okay. You're arguing from a idealistic position when it comes to abortion. because you're saying the ideal of saving human lives, even if making abortion illegal only cuts down abortion by 1%, that's still worth it because we're saving those babies. So why is it that once those babies are born, we shouldn't save them from dying from chronic health conditions they could have developed?
Again, two things can be true at once, Alex. One, I'm going to bring it back to the whole Jewish thing again, right? One, it's bad to kill Jews. Two, even if you cannot take care of those Jews, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can kill them, right? So just because you can't take care of them doesn't mean that you should kill them. That's it. So it all comes down to whether I think that the fetus is a human life or not, right? So if it is a human life, regardless of the consequences, is it okay for me to kill it?
Do you think a 12-year-old poor black child with what's it called, diabetes, is a human life?
Yeah.
Okay, so why should we not protect him?
Well, of course we should protect him. What are you talking about?
Well, so then why won't we give him universal health care? It's not his fault. His parents.
That's a valid question, but that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Maybe it will. We're not talking about universal. Right, but I just feel we're talking about abortion, bro.
I know, but I feel like if you're gonna be like, if you're, this is the issue I do have with conservatives on this argument, is I feel like their concern for the human life starts at conception and ends from the point the baby is born. And after the baby is born, they don't really care that much anymore.
That's a giant straw man, bro.
Because if they did, they would be in favor of giving the American kids universal health care. Because
this is assuming that universal health care has no flaws. The reason that conservatives, do you really think conservatives are sitting there being like, oh, this baby is so valuable when it's in utero, but then once that baby comes out of the womb, that kid could go fuck itself?
Because once the baby comes out of the womb, they think pragmatically. But when the baby's in the womb, they think idealistically. It's this double standard they have. When it comes out of the womb, they're like, well, let's see if the economics make sense. I get it. If the economics made sense, everyone would be in favor of universal healthcare. I get that, right? But the economics don't really make sense, because if we want universal healthcare, we have to pay a lot more in taxes. So then they start thinking, well, I don't know if the cost-benefit trade-off is there. And they just forget about the fact that if we don't give Americans universal healthcare, tens of thousands of them will die. But for some reason, when the fetus is in the womb, they don't think about all these other consequential arguments. They're just like, it's a human life. We got protected at all costs. It's a massive double standard that I see with pro-life.
How is that a double standard? Look,
because again,
I'm going to equate this to the Jew thing again. Two things can be true at once, right? You don't have the capacity to take care of Jews. Also, it's wrong for you to kill them because you don't have the capacity to take care of them. It's the same exact thing. It's literally a logical equivalent. If you believe that a fetus is a human life, the same way a Jew was back in the concentration camp times, just because you don't have the capacity to help take care of it does not necessarily give you permission to kill it.
That's not really a correct analogy, because first of all,
it's exact equivalent, bro. It's literally logically exactly the same.
Okay.
And that's why I need to push back a little bit when you said, "Oh, I just think pragmatically," and that's it. Everybody has their values that they start from. Their values are the principles, right? So you already went into this debate for whatever reason, which is fine. I have my values too. You went into this debate saying, "Hey, I'm going to choose the pro-choice position and start from there as a first principle," right? And for me, I did that with the pro-life position. But then again, for me, I already sort of weighed out the options and everything, because I really don't have an ideological stake in it. I'm not religious, right? I look at it purely from a scientific standpoint.
Let me give you a better analogy. This would be like if you were arguing like, hey, we need to protect the Jews. Like, let's say this is 1943, and you're saying, yo, like, these Jews in Germany are being murdered. We need to protect the Jews, right? I'm like, yeah, and we should also protect the communists and the Catholics. And you're like, I don't really care about them. I'd be like, well, why do you only care about the Jews? And you were like, well, dude, like, you know how expensive it is to protect the Catholics and the communists? I'm like, but you said with the Jews, it doesn't matter how much it costs. We should protect them at all costs. Well, yeah, that's different. Those are Jews. But like, okay, so why should we think very, utilitarian when it comes to the Jews? I mean, to the Roman Catholics, but why should we think very idealistically when it comes to the Jews? It's either like you want to protect human life or you don't. Or you're just picking and choosing, and you think,
no, it's not picking and choosing, because again, abortion itself is the immediate consequence. Hold on, the immediate consequence of an abortion is that they die because you're murdering them, right? As opposed to denying somebody universal health care, the immediate consequence is not that they die.
Well, they die pretty soon. Does it really matter if they die right away or they die pretty soon?
Yeah, because the intention matters, right? Do you think people are denying people universal health care because they want them to die? No, maybe there's other circumstances of that happening. And
Do you think a mother is getting
it's
an abortion because she wants to like kill her baby? No, she's doing it because
yes,
she doesn't want to take care because she
yes.
doesn't.
The whole
But
entire point of that.
it doesn't work.
Again, she doesn't. Again, I mentioned this earlier.
Abortion.
Mens rea, right? So mens rea. She doesn't think that she is killing the kid, but does she want to get rid of the fetus inside of her? Yes. Does she want to get rid of the thing that is gestating inside of her? Yes. She just doesn't think that it's a kid, but she still wants to get rid of it.
The doctor finds ways to backwards rationalize why he's not giving healthcare. He's like, oh, it's not my fault. It's the insurance system, blah, blah, blah. Everyone can find ways to backwards rationalize their actions. But I don't see how like that.
Dude, I don't know why I'm taking the position of I want universal health care. Okay. I don't know if practically that will make sense.
But I get that. I don't think it makes sense practically either, right? I'm fully in agreement with you. But why is it when universal health care, you're thinking practically, but when it comes to abortion, you're thinking ideologically?
Because it's a human, it's a human being. I am being practical in the sense of preserving human life, right? Because it's a big question mark of whether universal health care will actually help humanity or not.
It will absolutely preserve. Let's just assume it will. I can show you studies on this that it will preserve American lives, tens of thousands.
Okay. And then I can also show you studies that if the economy crashes, then more than tens of thousands of people will die as a result of that.
Okay, but then when it came to the abortion thing, when I said, okay, would you be in favor of if I could show you science that suggests that the economy will crash if we legalize abortion, you said it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because, again, the entire point of everything we're talking about, the entire point of everything we're talking about is to help with human beings, right? To help human beings flourish. You cannot help human beings flourish if you kill them. Again, it all comes down to whether that is a human being or not. And you acknowledge yourself that you don't always take, this would be different if you took consequentialist positions all the time. You don't, right?
I don't.
You brought up that whole thing of banning black people and sending them to Antarctica. And then
no, I don't.
I
take idealistic positions, yeah. On certain issues. I'm generally more of a pragmatist.
And what are those ideals founded upon?
I don't know. I guess my imagination.
That your values. No, your values.
Should I pull out my ass? Yeah, like my values. Okay,
yeah,
sure.
Your values, yeah.
Right, but again, like this is, I'm surprised you're not seeing this, but I do see this as like.
No, I am seeing it. It comes down to first principles thinking. What is the first principle? The first primary goal of everything that you're doing and everything you argue and talk about is to help with human flourishing, right?
But if those people, okay, but dude, if the 20,000 people die from a lack of healthcare, how can they flourish?
What do you? I don't know.
Well, they can't.
I could say the same exact thing. How could we? If we're aborting millions of babies, how can they flourish? They can't. They're dead.
Right. I get that. But okay, look, if you were saying I don't really care about whatever, like you can make.
Do you agree that the intention matters?
Depends on what we're talking about.
Like the immediate consequence of a certain action, does that matter? Right? Because the immediate consequence, the first order consequence immediately of an abortion is that a human being dies, right? The first order consequence of denying universal health care doesn't, right?
They might. Well,
they don't die immediately just because
they might. Okay,
you deny them human.
Yeah, they might die in a few months. I mean, does that really? Okay, second, does that really matter though? If they die right away or they die in a few months, does that really matter that much?
I mean, yeah, because the intention behind it is important.
But like, really, like it matters.
So basically, by your definition, then. Because if I think abortion is murder, right, and then you think denying, and you're saying, okay, me thinking abortion is murder, and me denying universal health care to someone, it's contradictory because they both result in somebody dying.
Yeah, right? They do.
Okay, so which is worse? If I just run up to somebody and stab them and stab them to death, or I deny them universal health care, which is worse?
Well, you can have degrees of worse. I would say, obviously, stabbing someone is a lot worse than denying them health care.
Okay, so degrees of worth. So I'm saying, okay, universal health care really isn't, denying it is maybe bad, but it's not as bad as killing a baby. That's all I'm saying.
I don't see why, but you earlier you said that you think like a 2-year-old is more valuable from intrinsic life perspective than a 2-month-old, right? So you're killing someone who you think is actually a higher life form by denying them universal health care.
What?
You said, remember I asked you earlier, I was like, okay, do you think, for example, from intrinsic value perspective, a 2-year-old has more value than 2-month-old fetus? And you were like, yes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, who are the people who suffer from lack of healthcare? It's people who are born. It's not fetuses, assumingly, right? So yeah. So you're hurting
What does
someone
that have to do with abortion,
because
bro? That's what I'm trying to say.
according to your earlier logic, the people who are suffering from a lack of universal healthcare are higher order beings who have more intrinsic value. Because it's people who are actually on this planet instead of fetuses.
Again, it doesn't matter, right? Regardless, I said before, I make a value judgment. At that point, I would say, okay, well, if we provide universal health care to 20-year-olds that are sick as opposed to 90-year-olds that are sick, and we say, hey, 90-year-olds, not enough universal health care for you, but 20-year-olds, yes, it is. Then at that point, by your logic, that means that I'm saying, oh, the 90-year-olds, you guys, I'm basically killing them, right? No, instead, what you're doing is you only have a certain amount of universal healthcare to go around, and you make a value judgment to say,
Well,
hey,
it's
I'm
not
going to
universal.
do that here rather than the other ones.
It's not
But then
universal.
that doesn't necessarily mean that I am approving of killing these people,
Kevin,
right? So that's what people with the universal healthcare idea, again, I don't necessarily think universal healthcare is a bad thing, right?
Well, okay, so
but two things can be true at the same time, man. It's like, one, you're stuck in a bad position to say, hey, I need to give universal healthcare to one group, and then another group I don't give it to. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think that they should go die. You're making a tough decision.
I get that. Well, first of all, it wouldn't be universal healthcare if we allow the 18-year-olds to live and the 90-year-olds to die, because that's not universal, right? That goes against the definition of universal. So right now, the way our healthcare system budgets resources is on money. So if you have money, you get healthcare. If you don't, you don't. And actually, I'm not necessarily opposed to that system. Sure, I think idealistically that universal healthcare would be better. From a practical standpoint, I don't think it's the way to go in the U.S. at least not in this point in time. Not without having way
Again,
more.
dude, we're not debating universal healthcare, bro. We're debating abortion. It's about whether it should be illegal or not, whether it's wrong or not.
It ties back. Hang on. Let me just do my monologue. So it ties back into that. So, right. So if we can acknowledge that universal healthcare will save people's lives, I just don't see why you would think very practically when it comes to that, but very ideologically when it comes to abortion. You're saying, well, it has to do with the order, because when you get an abortion, you're killing that baby right away, versus when you're denying someone universal healthcare, they die like later, not right away.
And it's not guaranteed. Hold on. Does everybody that's denied universal healthcare die?
Is every baby that would have gotten abortion would have been a child? No, a lot of babies don't.
No, but every single baby that got aborted dies.
Okay.
So basically, that's why it's different, right? Because you aborting a baby guarantees that it dies. You denying universal healthcare to somebody doesn't guarantee that they die.
Okay, so you think it
has for example, right? So let's say, for example, that somebody passes a law and says, hey, we don't it's not a law to wear seatbelts anymore. Okay. Well, when you end up doing that, more people are going to die. Does that mean that you saying, oh, taking the seatbelts off means that you actively are trying to kill people? No.
Okay.
The immediate me making a law saying you don't need seatbelts doesn't immediately result in people dying. That might be a side effect consequence of that. Similarly, denying people universal healthcare might be a side effect consequence of making people die. But it's not that everybody who's denied universal healthcare doesn't die. Everybody who gets aborted dies. They are two fundamentally different things. And again, this is coming from somebody who would be pro universal healthcare.
I understand. I know you're not in favor of people dying. I understand that, right? The contradiction isn't that. The contradiction is that you're thinking very logically and practically when it comes to one. And I'm trying to figure out
why. I'm thinking very logically and practically for both.
No, you're thinking very idealistic.
Hold on. No. Because this is where the mess up is, right? I believe that human fetuses are human beings, right? So practically speaking, I want human beings to live. I don't want them to die. So practically speaking, aborting them makes sense. Logically, if I think that's a human being, then aborting that is bad because you're killing it.
Not having universal healthcare 20.
So how is that idealistic?
But then according to that logic, practically speaking, by not having
this is whataboutism, bro. Come on, you know what this is.
Hang on. 20,000 to 30,000 American U.S. citizens died by not having universal healthcare. You're thinking
this is
consequentially.
whataboutism, man. Come on.
But you're thinking consequentially when it comes to one, but you're thinking not as consequential when it comes to another one. I don't know how else to say it. The argument you said earlier,
because you don't need to be fully consequentialist or fully deontological for everything, but there's certain deontological principles that you should have, but you always go back to. It's first principles thinking, right? So my deontological positions are freedom of speech, your right to bear arms, your right to not get murdered, right? You can take consequentialist things beyond that, but if you start suppressing free speech, if you start taking away people's guns, if you start murdering people, it doesn't matter what your excuses are for that. It is wrong in and of itself. So you don't need to be all deontological or everything that, because if I had a fully deontological position, right, of saying like lying is bad all the time, well, then let's say, for example, I don't know, we just keep bringing up Nazis. Let's say that I'm hiding Jews and then seriously, like, let's say that I'm hiding Jews and then some Nazi officer comes by and be like, hey, are you hiding Jews?
You don't have to hide Jews
according to my
anymore,
deontological position, I shouldn't lie. So yes, I am hiding Jews. Like, no.
You don't have to do that anymore. We Jews were allowed to mingle and live our own lives nowadays.
Yeah. So that's why having a deontological position on certain issues is key. So if your whole claim is, hey, you have deontological positions on certain things and consequentialist positions on other things, and that's an inherent contradiction, I outrightly deny that, because obviously I will have some consequentialist positions on certain things, but I do still have deontological principles that I will always come back to, and deliberately murdering something, right, regardless of the consequences, that is always going to be a position that I hold.
But can you, in that same token, argue that we're murdering 20 to 30,000 Americans by not giving them health care?
No.
Why?
I mean, you could argue that, but again, that's actually a consequentialist argument. You're not killing people by denying them universal health care in and of itself, by the mere fact that there are people who are denied universal health care that don't die. Automatically, you're in a consequentialist framework.
But does it matter that this policy kills some people but not all people?
Of course it does. It's something to take into consideration, of course.
But is that like really the big factor? Like the
let me flip this on you, man. So hold on. You want universal health care, because I could just flip this on you.
Don't.
You want universal health care and to save 20,000 people.
I don't.
But then the economy crashes as a result, and 100,000 people want to die.
Kevin, I've said
so
that
basically, in order for you to get universal health care, you want hundreds of thousands of people to die for you to get universal health care. How do you explain yourself, bro?
Kevin, I've said multiple times, I'm not actually in favor of universal health care. Do you not?
And why are you bringing it up?
Because it's not ideologically inconsistent with me, just ideologically inconsistent with you. I'm not in favor of universal healthcare, bro, because of the practical reasons. Because it involves, the only way we can do universal healthcare is if we insanely raise taxes on the wealthy. And I'm not in favor of insanely raising taxes because it will crash the economy, blah, blah, blah. Right? But it will save lives.
Yeah.
There's just no denying that we institute universal health care while we all have to pay more in taxes. It will save some people's lives.
Again, this is why it's important, dude. I feel like I don't know why you don't understand this. Okay. So giving somebody universal health care in and of itself will not save somebody's life.
I understand it.
Because by the mere fact that some people you give universal health care to and they don't die, right?
I understand.
As opposed to with an abortion, 100% of the time when you abort a baby, it's going to die.
I understand that. I'm not like some simpleton. I understand that. I understand there might be some people who have chronic health conditions who don't get health care who still wind up surviving because of luck or whatever, right? My whole thing is, does it really matter if 100% of them die or 70% of them die? Like, is that really a big factor? It's still U.S. citizens dying. Like, why does it matter so much? Okay, let's say with abortion, every time if we make abortion illegal and people don't actually get abortion, 100% of the people who have been aborted survive. Versus if we institute universal health care, we save maybe 70% of the people because 30% of the people would have survived on their own, right? It's still tens of thousands of people that we save. Why does it matter if it's 70% or 50% or 100%?
It doesn't. Again, it's a whole different thing. We're talking about two whole different frameworks, right? One is bad in and of itself. You judge it based on the action itself. The other one you judge based off of the consequences, right? You're making a consequentialist argument for universal healthcare. I'm making a deontological argument, saying killing is bad in and of itself, no matter what. Killing an innocent human being is bad in and of itself, no matter what, right? regardless of what happens afterwards.
Okay, you can't use these.
You're making the argument that because of the consequences, because of the consequence of universal people not having universal health care, right? You see the difference there?
Yes, the consequence of people in America not having universal health care is some of them will die.
Yeah.
Just like the consequence of people getting abortions is babies die.
Oh, no. Yeah, exactly. That's the key point. Hold on. That's the key point. The consequence of denying universal health care is some people will die. The consequence of keeping abortion legal is that all the people being aborted will die.
I understand that.
You see the difference there? One is everybody dies. One is some dies. Right? So then,
but why does it matter if everyone dies or some people die from an act? Either our goal is to protect human lives at all costs or it's not. Why does it matter?
It is, yes.
Okay, so why does it matter?
Because it's bad in and of itself. It's first principles thinking.
Right, but if we know for a fact.
Come on, Alex. Come on, man.
Come on, what? No, if we know that 50%, if we know that, I don't know, that instituting universal healthcare will save, we know that for a fact. Just grant me that argument because it is true anyway, that tens of thousands of Americans will survive. Then why does it matter that only 70% of them would have died or 80% of them would have died? Why does that part matter? Like, what's the relevance there? I understand.
Because the relevance is the grander implications of that.
What are
right? Such as the economy and all those types of things, right? Again, there are certain things in which you judge it from a consequentialist framework, and there are certain other things that you judge from a deontological framework, right? A deontological framework of something being bad in and of itself. We're talking in two different domains here.
Deontological means, because I don't understand that term.
It's basically saying that something is wrong or right in and of itself, right? So basically, like, it's right or wrong no matter what. It's a first principle with which you expand everything else off of.
Well, if a lack of healthcare means people dying, then wouldn't that fall under that? Or
no, if lack of healthcare 100% of the time meant everybody dies, yeah.
But what if it's just 80% of the time they die?
It's still a consequentialist argument. It's still saying it's like an if then. Like, if this happens, then this will happen. Then that's automatically a consequentialist.
I don't know. Okay, fine. I just don't see why.
Deontology, on the other hand, is saying killing an innocent human being is bad in and of itself, regardless of the consequences.
Yeah, I guess I just don't see you. I guess this is where you and I differ, but and I guess we could agree to disagree.
Honestly, dude, don't take this the wrong way, but if you studied philosophy, you'd understand, especially in terms of like ethics, you would understand. Yeah, but what you're saying just doesn't make any sense right now.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I've never formally studied philosophy. I will grant you that. But I think that people who tend to study this stuff, they go so deep that they actually come out on the other side, meaning they start doing these weird circles. I'm not saying that's you, but that's kind of the pattern I've seen. So I don't know if that's like a convincing argument. But I would say that I just am, again, I'm not seeing the difference between the 100%, like what if this action kills 100% of people and this action kills 80% of people, why that's such a big difference? Like, it's still people are dying. A lot of
I think this guy, let me just bring up a chat. I think this sums it up perfectly. Killing all babies versus some people will die with universal health care. That's really what it is, man.
Well, we're not talking about killing all babies.
It comes down to saying, hey, like you acknowledged before, that it's bad. It would be worse if I went up and killed somebody than if I denied them universal health care, right? Right. So you inherently understand that some things are bad in and of themselves. So killing an innocent person is bad in and of itself, regardless of the consequences. So we're talking in two different frameworks here.
No.
To compare them to doesn't make any sense.
I think they're both bad. I just think going and stabbing someone is worse.
Yeah. And so why is it worse?
But I'm not convinced that an abortion is worse than denying someone universal health care. I think it's probably the opposite, if anything.
If you're not convinced that, yeah, because you don't think the abortion, it's a human life. That's why. I do.
That's not necessarily true. I would, according to your definition, I would grant you that it falls under human life. I just don't see why a fetus life is more important than a 12-year-old with diabetes life.
I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying that deliberately killing a human fetus is worse than denying an old person universal health care.
Well, hang on. Why are we saying old person? Like, let's not make it like because that kind of skews the example. Let's bring this back to a 12-year-old poor black kid with diabetes.
Okay, fine.
Think of little Jamari, Evan. You're killing Jamari.
Okay. I think it is worse to kill a kid with my bare hands or with scissors, right? Because I think this is important also to like. Do you know how abortions happen?
How abortions happen? I'm pretty sure they fucking. I think it's pretty like rudimentary. I think they fucking vacuum that shit out of the mom's vagina or something like that.
Yeah.
Or I mean, well, up to a certain point they can give you like a series of pills, but after a certain point they gotta have to like kind of like fuck with it and shit.
Yeah, and so usually what they do is they go in with scissors and they cut their head off. And a lot of times, what ends up happening, there's actually some amazing stories of some people who worked for like Planned Parenthood and stuff. They saw what was actually going on and they quit, and they made it their life's mission to be against it. So there's this one specific lady, I think her name's Abby Johnson. My dad knows her, but basically, like she saw that there was she was helping with an abortion, and she saw the fetus. Right, they had this like the vacuum thing. This probe that was gonna like kill it come toward it, and the fetus started backing away and running away from the probe, and you could see that in the ultrasound, right? And so yes, I think that's killing a kid, and that was first trimester as well. It's pretty early. So yes, I think doing that and having a probe go toward a human fetus as it runs away for its life, even though apparently it's not sentient, is worse than denying somebody universal health care.
I mean, yeah, that story is like super anecdotal, though. You do have to grant that. Like, we don't.
It's not just anecdotal; it's scientific. You want to talk about science? You want to bring up the stages
of fetus, wait, that this fetus in this situation was running away from the scissors?
Well, we can bring up a chart. I can look it up. We can bring up a chart of the stages of human development for a fetus.
No, but like, how would you prove that like you have the ultrasound of that baby like running away? I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying it's super anecdotal.
Oh, no. There's ultrasounds available of that. You could look them up.
Of fetuses running away from scissors.
Yeah, or being vacuumed out and shit. Or then stuff. No. We can't show that on YouTube.
Why? That should be fine. That's under scientific, right? I think we should be okay with that.
Okay, let me see.
Yeah, I think we should be fine with that. If you could show me a video of a fetus running away from scissors, you might get me to budge my position. So,
let me see. This is such a weird thing to.
I want to see some fetus running away.
Who was attempted? Let me see this.
Well, if you can show that, you will actually have slightly disproved my position because I said that sentience happens at 4 or 5 months. So if you can show me a 3-month-old running away from scissors, then that by default would make it sentient. So you would have actually weakened one of my position. So that's why I think it would be like pretty strong argument if you could show that.
Let me see really quickly. I just need to make sure it's not
playing with fire. Babies running away, fetuses running away from scissors. That's what we're about. Yep. Playing with fetuses.
It's totally effed, bro. So I find one of like a failed abortion attempt, which does happen. So that tends to happen when it's a bit later term. This one's hard to see.
I totally can believe that could happen in like 7 or 8 months. I just can't believe it would happen at 3 months.
There's this one video by Ben Shapiro. Can we bring that up?
Yeah. Is it like a fetus demonstration type of video that Ben does? It's like ultra Jew, so I severely doubt he would even look at that without having like his yarmulke fall off. But yeah, you can share the screen.
Yeah. Hold on. He actually posted it quite recently. Trying to find it. I remember it just popped up on my feed, and I think it was in response to obviously all the.
Kevin, I really am just having a hard time believing the video exists of a 3-month running away from scissors because they're not sentient at that point. But if you can show that, I will happily.
I'll show you that he demonstrates the stages of development. I used to know where to get that.
No, but I want to see like the baby running away from the scissors. Like I want to see the baby going, no, not the scissors. And then the doctor's like, yes, abortion. Fuck you, liberals.
It exists, man. Let me see. I don't know if it was at 3 months or not, but regardless, what happens.
This is definitely not at anywhere below 4 months.
Where was the man? Ben Shapiro posts a lot. Fuck. Oh, here it is. Okay, I found it.
Okay, let's
let me just make sure it buffers first. Hold on,
okay.
and then I'll bring it up.
Because you guys know there's nothing.
This went on way longer. What the hell? Why is this ad?
You guys know there's nothing pro-choicers love more than watching babies suffer. So this is killing the cliche that that most pro-lifers have about pro-choicers.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So he posted this on YouTube, so it's okay. All right. Because I think it's important for people. They just think it's like a breaking up of a bunch of cells, and it's just not. So
it just depends on what.
And again, remember, I took this as somebody who isn't religious. I take to a scientific conclusion that this is wrong.
See, that statement I still cannot get behind because I feel like you came to philosophical.
All right. See if you can get behind it after you watch this.
Okay.
24 weeks, most babies born prematurely will survive. This is a late-term abortion, okay? This is what her baby looks like in the womb. We can see that picture again. That's what that baby looks like. This is a less graphic picture of what an abortion looks like, okay? More graphic picture of what abortion looks like involves the snipping off of the crushing of the skull, the sucking out of the brains. It involves, and these are fully formed children. These are fully formed children. I have 2 beautiful children. The idea that you get to murder a kid. Okay, no one has a right to choose that picture. Go back to the other one. No one has a right to choose this. No one has a right.
Can you pause for a second? What are we looking at?
That's a baby. You don't get to kill it just because
that's a fetus that got aborted.
No,
but it's a failed abortion and then it died after.
But I want to see the scissors running away fetus.
Yeah. No, convenient to you. You don't have a right to say
that. You have to find that shit on like the
where
dark web,
and when and how to have the baby. That's an individual human being. And if that baby were outside the womb and you stuck a knife through its chest, you'd be charged with first-degree murder. You kill it in the womb, and we call it a human right. That's not a human right because that's a human, and that human doesn't have any rights because you just decided its rights are less important than your right to your own convenience. Despicable. Despicable.
I mean,
and so we're now going to play a game with the left. Let's play a little game with the left. The game goes like this. Okay, show the other image. The game goes like this.
Here it is.
At which point should you be able to kill this baby? Okay, we're going to play a game called When Should You Be Able to Kill This Baby? Because I've been told by people like Hillary Clinton that you're able to kill this baby all the way up to the very end, right? 32 to 30 weeks, right? And that's when the baby is fully formed. It can be born alive. It is a fully...
Okay, so look at this, right? So this is the first trimester up here. Already here, man, this text is small. I'll read it for you. The baby can grasp objects in the hand, organ systems are functioning. The baby has a skeletal structure, nerves, and circulation. Right. So this looks like a baby already, right? So this is still first trimester, and a lot of people still, most states still allow second trimester right here.
Kevin, I have no idea what this has to do with the baby running away from the scissors. This is just a chart.
Come on, man, dude, come on. Do you think that this is okay?
Well, what
Seriously, no. Look at this. No, look at this and say that that's okay.
This is like a purely an emotional argument. This is such an emotional.
No, it's a purely scientific argument. Does that look like a baby? Yes or no?
Look at this cute thing that's potentially a baby, potentially a fetus, and tell me you want to kill it. That's a purely emotional based argument.
It really looks like a baby, bro. It's like a mini. It's a mini baby.
That is
so. If you're pro-choice, you think that you can just get scissors, snip its head off, put a tube through its head. And
I'm still waiting on that fucking the baby being chased with scissors video. Like I want to see that.
I'm sure it's somewhere, man.
Don't think it exists. Not at 3 months or 4 months.
Let me ask you this, because you said what would it take for me to change my mind?
Yeah.
About let me.
You're not on the screen, Kevin. Put yourself on the screen.
What would it take for me to change my mind about abortion? So what would it take for you to change your mind about abortion? I never asked you that.
Yeah, okay, that's a fair question. I think you would have to. There's several things you could show me. You could show me some kind of macroeconomical arguments that abortion is actually hurting American society, meaning like.
Okay, so only a consequentialist.
Wait,
let me get this straight.
Wait, hang on. There's more to it than that. You have to let me finish. Okay, so there's several things. It's not just one thing. So if you could show me some kind of macro arguments that are like, hey, when we make abortion illegal, actually the economy thrives, crime goes down, we do better as a country. That could put a strong dent in it, in my argument. If you could show me that the baby's sentient at like 3 weeks and that it feels the pain and perceives things and that would probably change it. If you could show me that, hey, actually,
wait, hold on. At what point? At what point?
like 3 weeks or something like that. Like before any point before when I'm proposing abortion. I'm saying I'm cool with.
So when do you? Okay,
like
sorry.
up to 3 or 4 months. Sentience happens at 4 to 5 months. So if you can be like, hey, actually,
So if it feels pain before that, would you be against it?
if you can show me proof that the baby feels pain at like 1 month or 2 months, then I wouldn't say that might 100% change my argument. That would definitely tip the scales for sure in one direction. If you can show me that the baby, if
I
the
don't know
baby,
where to find it, but there's a study that shows that
well, hang on,
it feels pain at 8 weeks.
Okay, let me just finish answering your question because there's more to it than that. If you can show me that the baby is capable of surviving outside the womb, so hey, like if this fetus that we're aborting, if all we did was take it out of the vagina and give it to a foster family, it could survive. Like that might actually sway my argument because I'm like, well, why are we killing the baby? Let's just take it out of the mom and give it to a foster family, right? So there's things like that you could show me that could sway my argument. Yes, I don't think my
wait, okay.
Yeah, so
just because there's a lot of different things that
well, there's a
lot of babies when they're premature, you bring them out, right? They still need to be on like life support and stuff, but they're still alive, right? So there's babies there have been failed abortions that have happened where the baby is outside of the womb, it's alive, but the only way that they keep it alive is through like life support and stuff, and then inevitably dies. Is that still a baby that's alive outside of the womb?
You can't keep a baby alive at 3 months. Those are babies that are coming out like 7 or 8 months. That's not going to happen at 3 months, Kevin.
Okay.
And I'm saying
so hold on. So are you for banning second trimester abortions then?
When is second trimester? How many months?
For after 3 months.
Yeah, I think that's
first 3 months is first trimester.
I think that's when it starts to get dicey. Like I think, like I said, like 3 to 4 months is where I draw the line. So yeah, like I think after 3-4 months it starts getting dicey.
Okay.
Like
I mean that's reasonable then. Look, if somebody was like, hey, we're outlawing abortions everywhere except for the first trimester, I wouldn't be happy about it, but I'd be like, fine, I'll make that compromise. Because a lot of abortions do happen but here's another thing too. It does go against the whole thing of the fetus feeling pain. The fetus, I can't find it, I don't know where it is, but this study came out a few years ago that a fetus could potentially feel pain at 8 weeks, because at 8 weeks, it already has the nerves and everything built up. So it can for sure feel pain. And again, I don't think it's a valid argument to say that pain is the determiner of whether they should be aborted or not, because I could put somebody to sleep with drugs and then kill them in a painless way. That doesn't make it right.
That's again goes back to having nuanced positions. For every rule, there's exceptions. We can think of a hypothetical scenario. I'm glad we can look at this chart again. But
well, hold on. The fact that it gives you a little bit of, it takes you back a bit, maybe says something.
Like takes me back.
Maybe there's some part of you that doesn't think that this is right.
Wait, I'm fully kidding, dude. It doesn't take me back to anything. Like what does this chart take me back to? When I was a fetus? I don't fucking remember that.
So at what point, to requote Ben Shapiro, at what point can we kill it?
Yeah, I mean, at what point can we kill it? Well, I've already answered that question multiple times. I think 3 to 4 months.
Okay, so right here.
Yeah, right here.
Okay.
You're not going to get me to change my position based on an emotional argument by showing me pictures of fetuses. Like that's the worst way to get me to change my position.
No, I'm doing a logical argument of
that's
this
not,
is
you're just showing me pictures of cute little fetuses, and you're saying like, oh, like that should make you feel bad.
No, I'm saying at what point, because you were saying things like pain and stuff before, right?
I've done a good amount.
It can feel pain at this point.
It feels pain at 4 months.
8 weeks.
8 weeks. I don't think that's actually true. All the research I did on this show, and I can pull this up, but it starts to feel pain at 4 or 5 months. It doesn't feel pain at 8 weeks. But let me pull this up, because this is a nice little chart that Ben just pulled out of his ass. What age and fetus feel pain?
Look, at week 11, it already has nerves and circulation.
Okay,
so you can already feel pain at that point.
Okay,
by definition, you can feel pain. You have nerves.
No, it's 24. It's 24 weeks, bro. Like I'm looking
based
at
on what? Bring it up.
Like a whole bunch of sources. Hang on.
Okay.
Feel pain.
Is the source Planned Parenthood by any chance?
No. Okay, hang on.
And again, like I said earlier, regardless of whether it can feel pain or not, it's still bad. Just because something because I can kill something without it feeling pain. It doesn't justify it.
Okay, hang on. There's a whole bunch. So, given that context only becomes functional, tracks only develop. Oh, so this one says 24 weeks. Then here says new studies found that unborn babies feel pain at 12 weeks. So this is the earliest is 12 weeks, which is still 3 months. This shows that, okay, the published scientific literature shows that.
Okay. So hold on. So that's still first trimester, right? So you agree then that you said, this is good. We're making progress. We're pushing it back. So you said before you'd say 4 months. So at the very least, so at 12 weeks, that is a little bit before 3 months. Because
that's 3 months, bro. Yeah. 12
no, because
3.
No, because 3 months is 90 days.
What? No, dude. 12 divided, like there's 4 weeks in a month. Like it's 3 months. 12 weeks is 3 months.
No, 12 times 7 is 84. So that's 84 days.
What? What are you talking about? We're talking about in terms of weeks here.
12 times 7 is 84 days. So 84 versus 90.
There's 4 weeks in a month.
It's not 3 months. Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay.
12 weeks isn't 3 months. 3 months is 90 days.
Okay, this is
4 weeks is
I know, but this is not talking about days. This is not talking about days in terms of week. But let's just assume
but that's like a whole week difference almost, right?
Okay, let's just
assume it's more like 13 weeks than it is 12.
Okay, let's just say it's 13 weeks. Let's say it's 11 weeks. I don't have a hard line in the sand, right? I don't have like a hard line in the sand. I think it should be like, I think around 3-4 months is a reasonable starting point. If you want to make it 3 months, then I'm okay with that. What we're talking about here, let's also be clear, is federal protection for abortion. So we're not talking about law that makes abortion illegal. That's not what Roe versus Wade was about. Roe versus Wade was a law that gave federal protection to women who want to get abortion. And that protection was, I think, up to 4 months. I forget what exactly it was. And I'm saying we should bring the law back that gives federal protection to women to get an abortion up until a certain point. So if you want to make it
4 months, because what was it? Roe versus Wade was 4 months.
If you want to
start to feel pain at 12 weeks, so wouldn't you?
Well, it depends on which study we go off. But
so it can feel pain after 12 weeks, right?
So let's make it 12 weeks then. I'm cool with that.
Okay. So Roe versus Wade was what? It was abortion protections up to what? 4 months?
It was, I think, up to 4 months. But again, there's different studies on this.
So you'd be okay with it bringing it back, knowing that in the 4th month that all these babies get aborted, they're feeling pain.
Okay, we don't know that. There's different studies, and different studies suggest it's different times. Some studies say it's 12 weeks. Some studies say it's 16 weeks. Some studies say it's 20 weeks. There's a whole bunch of studies on this. There's not, but yes, if someone can just show me definitive proof that the baby feels pain at 12 weeks, then I would say let's make it 12 weeks.
Yeah, and there's also evidence to show that there's 8 weeks too.
I have never seen any of that evidence.
I can bring it up after the stream. I don't know where it is, but
the earliest
there's because it's still sort of like it's trying to see whether, because it has to go down to the study of pain itself, which is a psychological condition, right? So, but technically, it has all the faculties to feel pain at 8 weeks. So it could be anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, which is well below the threshold. So that being the case, then if you think that pain is a prerequisite, or the ability to feel pain dictates whether an abortion is wrong or not.
No, I think it plays a role. Yeah, I think it plays a role. I don't think it's like the end all be all only factor, but I think it plays a role. I think it's probably more wrong to kill something that can feel pain than something that can't feel pain. We can agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's different degrees of wrong. So yeah, I mean, like, but every single study I've ever seen on this, and I've seen a bunch, suggests that it's like usually around 12 or 16 weeks or even 20 weeks. I've never seen a single study that says it's at 8 weeks. I just never seen it.
I think we should wrap this up, bro. It's already 3 hours. This is a very engaging discussion. Look, I want to see this. I know it got heated at some points, but dude, it's not anything personal, obviously. But
yeah, no, nothing personal.
I just felt like I was just trying to say things and you just weren't getting it, and I just got frustrated. That's all.
Well, I want to see the fetus killing video with the scissors. I mean, I think we should do a part 2 once we.
I could find it. Yeah, I could find it. It definitely exists. So the one that I'm thinking of, it shows the actual crushing of the fetus in the skull and its head getting chopped off and shit. It's brutal.
Yeah, we can do like a infield breakdown of like the baby. like being killed. We could talk about like the skill of the baby, like trying to get away. Like
yeah.
baby's the woman and the doctor is like
This baby could have been the next mystery, but
yeah, we can see we can like analyze like, oh look, it went left. It should have
it got amogged by a vacuum.
Yeah, like oh shit, like the baby should have kind of did a 180 here, and he could have like amogged the doctor and like escaped the scissors and popped out of the vagina and banged the mom and then reproduced.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought we did go for a while, but yeah, I thought it was a good discussion. I didn't think
I thought that was great.
Yeah.
I didn't think we would disagree that heavily, but cool. Again, I recommend just for those of you guys who didn't understand where I was coming from, I recommend Alex, but then the rest of the audience too that doesn't really understand deontology versus consequentialism, or Kantian ethics versus utilitarian ethics. I think you should look that up so you kind of have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. Basically, Immanuel Kant is known for deontology, even though it's not just him, but it's kind of like first principles thinking of saying, okay, well, something is wrong or right in and of itself. And so for me, I have that position with, the freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, as well as, or the right to defend yourself, I should say, right? Because the right to bear arms, like I don't think you should be able to own a nuke, for example, right? But you have the freedom of speech, right to defend yourself, and then you also have the right to not be murdered. So those are three. I probably have some more, deontological positions, but those for sure I definitely have. And so that's what it comes down to, right? So regardless of the consequences of it, those things are, when they're infringed upon, they're bad in and of themselves. So that's kind of the way that I view it. And so I think that was kind of like a lot of the things that you saw with the disagreements that we had here is, I have certain deontological principles, and then Alex was operating off the assumption that, he had a consequentialist positions.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward. I'm gonna get Natty pregnant and then chase her around with scissors and try to get that baby out. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a good discussion. People are in the comments are saying like, "Yo, Kevin mogged you." I think what you guys have to understand is like the way I like debate my friends is like totally different than the way I debate like someone who I don't like. Versus like like there was times where you interrupted me, but I'm just not gonna say anything like whatever because you weren't doing it in bad faith. So I'll just like kind of whatever like let it go. Versus if you were like someone I didn't like, I would have been like nah.
Yeah.
That's not me.
That's
like
why it was still good faith. Like I was really trying to understand
soft
you
or something like that. That's just like is a different way I debate friends than I do with people who I don't like.
Yeah, it's like I tried to, I was trying to understand you. You're trying to understand me. So by the way, anybody in the comment section, first of all, Alex is a far more superior debater than any of you guys in the comment section. So I encourage you to try to debate me on this topic on my channel. I will literally, I will make a topic up for it on my channel. But
there's someone that's saying you're two dudes. Let me call in as a woman. I do want to understand your point of view. Good faith. You think we should? I mean, it could be fun.
Maybe some other time, man. Just like keep in mind, I am streaming every single night for all of July. I need the rest. But what's this lady's name?
Mountains. Give her a way to reach out to you so she can come on.
So you can email me kevinraywilder@gmail.com, and I will literally set up a abortion debate probably this weekend. So I gotta do it pretty quickly. Tomorrow, actually. Wait, Alex, you can join me for this if you want to. I want to make a manosphere tier list again, and I think it'll be fun.
What is that?
I want to do it sometime this weekend. So either tomorrow, Saturday, or Sunday. Again, I'm like streaming every day. So whatever day is good for you.
We got our group podcast, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, I want to do it before then.
Friday, tomorrow I can't because it's me and Natty's special little day, so we're gonna go out. But
Nice.
So I can't do that. Yeah, we're gonna do I'm gonna scrape some eggs out for a pussy and then jizz in them. we're gonna do a little stock.
Chase her out with scissors and a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna let Rhaegar like spit in it and like fucking shit in it. I'm gonna put it in the microwave. We're gonna see what kind of creature we can come up with in my apartment. No,
so it doesn't necessarily need to be this weekend, but I want to try to I think people love tier lists. They're very interactive. And I think it's just fun to just make tier lists about manosphere. We could even do tier lists of like the best and worst pickup lines maybe at some point. Like I think it'll be fun. People love tier lists for some reason. I love them. I think they're great.
Yeah, no, they're fun. We can definitely do
I think
it.
it's just a good stream topic.
Let's chat offline. If I'm free Saturday, I can do it. Saturday I have that debate with the the dominatrix slave. I can't
have fun with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll do some sort of
next week. I should be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'll do multiple of them. So I'll come up with some tier list thing to do this weekend, and then
this is probably going to be the last pro-choice Roe versus Wade debate I do, though, because I do feel like.
Did you do others before this?
I did a few. Yeah, I do feel like I don't want to take my channel in a political direction, and this is somewhat of a political thing, even though it does kind of relate to game. Because if you get some chick pregnant, and then it does somewhat relate, but it's not a direct relation. Yeah, so it's probably going to be the last political debate I do for a while. I'm going to go back to pickup and dating and manosphere and red pill debates.
Well, dude, if anybody ever challenges you to a political debate, just refer them to me because I love talking about this shit.
Yeah. I mean, I like talking about politics too. I just don't I don't want to take my channel in that direction because by the virtue of fact, whatever side I take in any political issue is 50% of your audience is not going to be happy with it.
And I've already recognized that. I mean, there's my audience either loves me or fucking hates me, and I'd rather be a polarizing figure than try to appease everybody.
I mean,
I'm not saying that you're trying to do that because you're a polarizing figure too. You have your principles, which is one of the reasons why I respect you a lot. But yeah.
Someone said, what happened to your debate with Zen Shapiro? He got sick, so it's being rescheduled, but I'm looking forward to that one. Zen Shapiro. It should be interesting who this Zen Shapiro guy is. But yeah, man, I thought it was a good discussion. If you find that fetus scissors video, definitely send it to me. I will watch it as I make love to Natty. It'll get me in the mood. I'll be like,
because you're very reasonable, and I think you're open to changing your positions on a few things, and I think if I give you the right evidence to show how brutal abortion really can be, I think you'll change your mind. I don't necessarily think you're going to think abortion is always bad, but I do think I think we even made a little bit of progress here where you said kind of, okay, well, maybe if they could feel pain at 8 to 12 weeks, then maybe not 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can watch that video; it'll kind of get me turned on. I can have crazy sex with that.
That just makes you'd be like, you know what? Actually, after watching this video, I think that you can abort them until 8 months. They had the opposite effect, Kevin.
Yeah.
Somehow this sexually turned me on so much.
There's nothing I love more than a fetus running away from scissors.
Yeah, or getting its head crushed in.
Yeah. I'm happy I'm not a mainstream figure yet because so much parts of my fucked up sense of humor would get clipped and breaking news. Alex from
dude, what's funny? I'm fine with joking about abortion too because it's the same way I'm fine with joking about murder. I still think it's the same. The whole point of a joke is that you're not serious. So
right.
Yeah.
Or so you think. All right, cool, man. So yeah, I think good discussion. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. So we got tomorrow I'm taking a night off, but then Saturday I got the debate with the the sex slave dude. That should be interesting and his dominatrix. And then we got our group podcast on Sunday. So that would be a good time. So then thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate you.
Oh, wait. Hold on. One more thing. When am I going to host the debate between you and Austin about whatever the hell you guys are arguing about?
Yeah. We can do
sometime next week, maybe.
Yeah, we can do it next week.
Yeah. That should be fun.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
Yeah.
Should be interesting.
Okay.
Cool, man. All right, guys.